Council work session special meeting for Tuesday, February 8th. We will begin with an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. First item is our public comment phase. I believe we have a few folks who would like to speak. I am going to try and keep track of our time because our 3-minute rule is a little more important these days. I will keep track of it on my phone, let you know what's going on. So, shall we, Rusty, who do you want to go first? Randy?
Randy's the top here.
Okay. Echo.
Can you hear me?
Hello, Randy, go ahead.
Sure, I'm Randy Neal, PO Box 1092, Cannon Beach. You're getting ready to finalize the, I lost something here. You're getting ready to finalize the SDC rates, and the staff is going to present you a laundry list of numbers to choose from today. The TSP is also starting to include comments about TSP for transportation. Some of those comments, I believe, are sort of misusing the League of Oregon Cities 2020 survey on SDCs. You know, in the beginning, you know, the consultants presented you nearby cities like Newport, Lincoln City, and Tillamook, and whatever, that said, these are $8,000. We propose $8,000. The issue is those cities are much larger than we are. You know, the information in the TSP is saying, you know, the average transportation SDC is in the $3,000 range because that's the average. Or there's information about Willamette Valley or South Willamette Valley. You know, the reality is the survey captured inputs for 97 cities. The sum of population for all of those, that survey is 1,000,009 people. So the average city in that survey is basically 19,000 people, a city that's much, much larger than Cannon Beach's size. The survey did conclude that smaller cities have lower SDCs, larger cities have higher SDCs, and they actually broke the data into quintiles, you know, fifths. And Cannon Beach size probably falls, you know, at the high end of the second quartile, the low end of the third quartile. And, you know, there was also information about other specific cities in that category, like Yachats and Sisters and Waldport, Yamhill, Cascade Locks, Lapine, and Banks. You know, basically, you know, my conclusion is Cannon Beach combined SDCs, including transportation, probably needs to be someplace between $5,000 and $8,000. You know, on the fourth page, I've actually proposed a process for getting there. You know, you're going to be asked to select from some huge matrix of numbers. And all of these numbers really represent 40 different projects. And you're going to have to blow all of this stuff back to 40 different projects because expenditures and collections must ultimately be tied down to each project. So my suggestion would be a lot more specific. Fix only the 3 projects that seem to be problematic, and then index, you know, that answer to inflation and let it grow over time. You know, the consultant's analysis came up with $8,425. You know, we've talked about in the past about the cap around calculation costs. I would recommend capping that at half of those calculation costs. That would reduce that number by $450. You've heard my arguments about the Nacoos Park improvements. I don't believe any of that is really related to development and housing. That's really tourism and cultural and ecological reasons. And that would reduce the answer by $1,000. And then the treatment plant has a capacity issue that was tied to the growth assumptions that I believe are misleading or inaccurate, and that would reduce that by $750. So I would recommend an SDC of about $6,200, but this would be for water, sewer, storm, and parks. And once you get through the transportation strategic plan, there'd be an additional amount for whatever projects are related to transportation. So this would be my recommendation. I'd also warn against, as we go through the transportation plan, later, that you start looking at the projects that are there and saying, are these things, which of these things are related to residential project growth? Because a lot of them really have nothing to do with growth. It's either, it's all about tourism. There's a couple of things there that probably do relate, and those are the things that should be wrapped into an SDC.
Hey, time, Randy.
Okay.
Thank you, though. Okay. Next would be Debatia.
Is okay. I think I figured out. Am I unmuted?
Hi, Deb. Yes.
We don't have okay. So is Ed Johnson on? He was gonna present first.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, he'll be on right after you. Go ahead.
Okay. So I have joined Sea Turtles Forever Blue Wave Microplastics on their board. And can you get the picture up? I'm trying to figure out how this picture goes up, but anyway. So I just I was down at Nakus Park walking around and saw all this plastic all over. And then I listened to the live presentation that Friends of Haystack Rock did. And I have decided to join them and initiate a huge education campaign. So I sent you some notes. Did everybody get copies of the email that I sent?
Ted.
Okay, good. So in 2021, they took out about 5,700 pounds of microplastics just from Whale Park and Nakus Park. And Cannon Beach is a hot spot for the microplastics because of the currents that come in into the river. And plus north of Haystack Rock and Crescent Beach are hot spots along the whole Oregon coast. To get Cannon Beach done takes about 2.5 months with 4 employees without operating costs or paying the mark. And just Cannon Beach alone on that basic is about $24,000. Of course, we're not expecting all of that. We just want to know if we can get some logistics support because we don't know what hiring is going to look like, if volunteers or what that's going to look like. And, to haul all of that debris out into a dumpster, not on site, and, no place to put our supplies to do it every day is a logistic nightmare. And if Bob and I are down there at 67 years old, we're not going to be able to lift all of that. So right now, HRAP, North Coast Land Conservancy, and all of them are trying to hire. And of course, I don't know where they're all going to live or work or have a home to rent because it's so expensive. Another problem with workforce housing, but the hotel restaurants and are saying, well, what about the food tax? What about the lodging tax? Why isn't the city paying? It should be a line item like garbage and a yearly expense. So that's the feedback I'm getting. Parks Committee is going to have a $90,000 this year. Last year, they had 17 recipients of the nonprofits. So that equals about $5,294 each. Last year's Sea Turtles got $2,000, which of course they appreciate, but it's a long ways from covering the cost. State parks, everybody goes, well, it's state parks problem. Well, state parks are not going to do it. They don't have staff or volunteers. And like with fireworks, we were ended up doing that. That was on the beach as well. Sea Turtles is the only one that has this system to operate this. So I don't know who's going to do it, or if we just leave the plastic on the beach. I think we all know that NOAA says about 1 million deaths a year of seabirds are happening because of the microplastics, and about 100 toxins are in each of the microplastics. And when somebody builds a fire on the beach with microplastics underneath, they're releasing toxic chemicals that their children, over 100 toxic chemicals that their children are breathing. So that is important. So who's going to do it, or we leave it? Clean beaches or toxic beaches? And what are the priorities? I know that Bruce, you had told somebody, because you had done some cleaning up in Florida, that about trying to get $7,000, but then that was nixed, and I don't know. I just want to be educated of what the obstacles are here. So, you know, yes, we banned fireworks. Yes, in the 3 years I've been here, we banned fireworks. Yes, on the food tax now, thank God. Yes, on North Coast Rocky Habitat Marine Conservation Site, because the Audubon Society that we're working with on that is now part of OPAC, and that will probably be passing soon. So we will have a marine conservation site at Ecola Point and Chapman Point. And now, yes, for microplastics cleanup, so we can have pristine beaches, because I won't take no for an answer, you guys.
Okay, that's good, because we're at 3 minutes, Deb.
Okay, well, just think about what's best for Cannon Beach.
Thank
And
you.
it's in your hands, and I timed it right, didn't I?
Good job. Okay, let's find Ed. Gonna try.
You will know the minute, the second that Ed gets on, that booming voice.
Okay, Ed, you got to unmute.
Probably talking and doesn't noise.
You need to unmute.
Ed? We can't hear you yet.
Okay, we'll try it. How about now?
There we go.
Yep.
For
Oh, I
it.
said all those words. Hey, I hope my time isn't up before I get to start. But some of you would probably prefer that anyway. I would, not really, but anyway. First of all, I'd like to thank the city of Cannon Beach for the support they have shown for our project with Sea Turtles Forever for the last 10 years. I came on that board in 12, so I'm 10 years, 3 of which I've been the president of the organization. I remain that, even though I'm up here in Tumwater. The closest thing I get to hit the ocean these days is opening my door to my patio and listening to I-5 about half a mile away. So I do miss the ocean, and I wish I could be there. But I'm so thankful that Debatia has stepped forward to be a champion for our cause, not only for the cause, for our champion, but a cause for having Cannon Beach the city that we'd like it to be, clean and pristine. Now, she mentioned how much we picked up last year. I won't review those figures, but you know, if I look at I've picked out 9 locations on the Cannon Beach, I'll call them our cells. Now, the last year, it was almost totally done in the area on Ecola Creek, both the north and the south side. So we spent way too much resources there because that's where the mess is. We didn't spend very much time on the Chapman Point to Breakers Point section. We spent nothing at Crescent Beach, nor the presidential streets, nor the Haystack north or south, or total Havana north or south. So there's 9 cells. We spent all of our money trying to get what time was available to complete the task right there in that limited space adjacent to Ecola Creek dump point. So I just hope that, as I've spoken and requested before this very same group, that at some point we should become a part of the normal budgetary process rather than relying on the limited funds available from the community parks and community services, which we do certainly appreciate the money they've given to us over the years, which amounts to every other year we get a fund, partly based on our own problems, partly on the cycle of when the budget is released and when it has to be completed. Those are 2 years we had a problem. But I really want to do thank you, and I just hope that we can continue to work in a positive fashion with the city of Cannon Beach to make those beaches as clean as possible. And guess what? One final comment. When I arrived in my new city, Tumwater, I was questioning some people that I happened to pass. Of course, I have always something to say, too much probably, but I asked them, well, what's your favorite beach in Oregon? She said, well, Cannon Beach. I said, what? You like Cannon Beach the best of all the beaches? She says, why is that? She says, there's no plastic. I love you guys, and thanks for your continued support. And I hope that you will see you're clear to put us in as a budget minded. We are part of the SIS cleanups crew, although we're not contracted. We'd like to be contracted and reduce the cost of the city's reliance on contract service for some of these, or increase the contract services that you make available, and that would include a budget line item in the city budget for Sea Turtles Forever. Thank you very much.
Well done, Ed. You did it in 3 minutes and 12 seconds.
Wow.
Thank you
Good
very
job.
much.
Thanks, Ed. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, good to hear from you.
Thank you.
Miss you. Yes.
You. Okay, Rusty, let's see if there's any hands being raised initially. I will ask for hands if there's any other public comments. Otherwise, we will move on to a really long meeting, I think. Okay, thanks, everybody. We will go to our first item, which fortunately is an introduction.
Hey, the Cannon Beach Finance Department and the whole city would like to welcome Ron Logan, our new Assistant Finance Director. Ron has worked as Chief Financial Officer for Martin North in Cannon Beach for the past 30 years. In that job, he oversaw all financial operations for between 5 and 14 separate hotel and restaurant properties throughout his tenure there. He's had experience with banking, insurance, legal, audit, personnel, and administrative oversight in the private sector. He looks forward to using this experience in the public sector at the city of Cannon Beach. Prior to his time with Martin North, he worked as an auditor at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Portland, Oregon, and worked on many municipal clients. He graduated from Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. Ron has also served as board treasurer for the North Coast Land Conservancy for over 20 years and has lived in Cannon Beach for over 30 years. He was also on the planning commission with many of you for 12 years here at the city. So welcome, Ron. I'm super excited to have you on board.
Thank you.
So
It's good to be here and look forward to working with everyone.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Yep, welcome, Mike, Ron, for filling.
Thanks.
Sounds like he's qualified.
I think so. Just a little.
Jury's out on that, but thank you, everyone.
First one we're going to jump into is system development charges. All right.
I'll recap the Oregon law ORS 223.297 through 314 provides a framework through which municipalities can establish system development charges to pay for capital improvements. Per state law, allowed capital improvements are facilities or assets used for water, wastewater, stormwater, transportation, or parks. Currently, the city of Cannon Beach imposes SDCs on the following utilities: water, wastewater, and stormwater. The current combined SDC rate for these three utilities is $4,253.50. The methodology for water, wastewater was last updated in 2003, and the methodology for storm was unchanged in 1996. The Public Works Department budgeted $45,000 for this long overdue project and conducted an RFP process to hire a consultant in late 2020. FCS's group proposal was selected based on the company's expertise in the field, taking into account the city's positive experience with FCS in the past work on the utility rate study. I want to apologize for not doing a better job defining what the SDCs are really for, when we use them, and what it goes for. So I'd like to just recap that. Nancy was kind enough to send an email asking some really good questions, and I should have been more clear on what SDCs are, not only for your purpose, but for the outside world that's listening to this review. First, I'd like to just say that our current ordinance that's online is under chapter 3.16. Pretty much outlines everything concerning the charges, the methodology, kind of the rules of the road when it comes to system development charges. But for tonight's purpose, I'd like to address some of Nancy's questions. First was, what are system development charges for? And under the city's municipality code 316, SDCs are defined as charges to pay for capital improvements. The purpose is to, under 3.16020, is to impose a portion of the cost of capital improvements for water, wastewater, and drainage for those developments or redevelopments that create the need for or increase the demands on water, wastewater, and drainage systems. Predominantly, we see this in new construction, but when they see redevelopment, if there's a change in a current structure that's on a piece of property, and it increases the number of meters and or connections to our infrastructure, that would apply under the redevelopment. Nancy's next question was, how does it benefit the city to increase the charges all in 1 year? And I'm going to turn it over to Doug in a minute, but I do want to say this. Because the rates originally established for SDCs have not been updated since 1996 and 2006 respectively, the city stands to not recover the true cost associated with the construction necessary to increase capacity to our infrastructure. So if you refer to our ordinance under 3.16.050, this methodology defines those, establishing those fees. Lastly, as noted in the staff report, the city of Cannon Beach currently charges for water, wastewater, and storm only. We are not collecting anything for our parks and or roads or trail improvements. The staff is proposing that we consider parks when updating our SDCs at this time, and roads will be proposed upon the completion of the TSP project that Jeff is spearheading, and council has adopted the projects that we will move forward on based on that project. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to Doug. Council had asked us in the prior meeting to bring back some phased approaches, either everything in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and Doug has outlined that. We'll let him go over that with you, and then if you have any other questions, we can answer them.
And I did have a question as to
You bet.
that phasing that,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have the.
Exactly. Go ahead, Doug.
Good evening, Cannon Beach. I'm Doug Gabbard with FCS Group, your old friend, and I'm joined by analyst Zach Hazel. We are delighted to share with you once again our knowledge of and enthusiasm for system development charges. So when we at our last episode, we talked about possibility of phasing in the SDC, possibly to the fully calculated rates, possibly not. And I want to show you a range of possibilities. I also want to entertain all of your questions, which is probably even more important. So I would say I don't have a real prepared speech here, and so you should shoot me your questions whenever it occurs to you, and let's talk about it, because I don't want to leave you with unanswered questions. That would be bad. So I want to.
We got a question already.
Let's do it.
Well, you may get to it, but I don't understand the rationale for spreading this out over a period of years when it's not like an individual water rates being increased and they pay that water rate year after year after year. The SDCs are for basically one time new construction or a reconstruction. So I don't understand why the person that builds this year has a lower SDC than the one that builds next year, and that's lower than the one that builds the next year, when it's not that person that built the first year is never going to see that rate again. So why are we looking at a phased increase rather than a one-time increase?
The answer to that lies in the politics of making a change that multiple parties can live with. So as you might imagine, the development community is not terribly enthusiastic about increases in system development charges. And some home builder associations are more vocal and activist than others. But just on principle, if you're asking anybody, one of us, would you rather pay more or less? Yeah, I'm gonna pay less. Thanks very much. And that's the whole thing with system development charges. They either have to pay more or less, and they're always going to choose less. That's just rational. When a city proposes to increase system development charges, it can impose a real burden on developers who have projects in their pipeline that they know that they're going to try to execute in a fairly near term. And they may not care that much at all what your SDCs are going to be 5 years from now, but they may care tremendously about what your SDCs will be 6 months or a year and a half from now. And so one way that the sausage gets made is the SDC is phased in so that the projects that are in the pipeline for the development community get a lesser blow, and the increase builds over time, and that helps get it passed in the first place. So everything that you said about hey, these aren't ongoing rates, this is a one-time charge. Everything you said is true. This is all about the politics of getting it done. Does that make sense?
Doug, this is Karen. Can I add something?
Please.
Would a phased approach also recognize some sort of unique economic situation that we may be in, and that you're considering that when you decide whether to go all in 1 year or the phased approach?
You could, yeah, definitely. I've heard that. I've heard that said before by cities. You know, they're in the midst of a downturn, and they want to burden development less currently, and then allow the SDCs to rise as things improve. And there's nothing wrong with that rationale. The rationale is not something you need. There's no legal requirement for it. But yes, that is something I have heard.
or a community they may want to encourage building, would hold off implementing something like this, which is community.
Or even pull building forward in time.
All right.
My question, I think, to you, Karen, was how does this affect the projects that the city has planned? If we phase it in, say, 1 year to 5 years, whatever it is, are these going to be able, are you going to be able to pay for the projects that you have planned with a lesser amount? And, granted, it's going to be the full amount after 4 or 5 years, but it's a lesser amount per year. So are you able to pay for those projects?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, we would realize that down the road. We just wouldn't realize it in the initial implementation of it. Whether it stops a project or not, it wouldn't necessarily. It's just that the city is not receiving that financial support in order to do those projects.
So would we have to draw from the general fund then to supplement what we wouldn't be
Be
getting?
more of a Bruce Laurie question than it would me.
The way I look at sort of a charge, whatever, is that the people that are here, the people that were here before us, which I think all of you have been here so long that there were nobody before, but these costs have been borne by those folks. And when so somebody comes in new, I see this as a charge that would kind of bring them up to speed for what some of the things, be it sewer plant improvements or whatever. So when we look at, like, for say it's wastewater or water, when we look at water or wastewater, we've got some big projects coming up. If the full amount of the charge is there, that's money that we have on hand. If it's not, it's money that we have to charge everybody else. So I see, this type of a fee as somebody buying into the system, if you want to call it that, and then that makes them whole. If you don't do it, or you just keep the rates low, what happens is that somebody else has to make it up. Be it in a loan or whatever.
Does that mean rates would increase, or does that mean?
It's hard to do an absolute, but if we were doing a project by rates, well, there's a lot of scenarios. If we were doing a project and we didn't have enough money in wastewater in the reserve or whatever, then we would probably have to take money from the general fund to be able to go ahead and get a project started. If we were trying to do a project and we had funds that we could allocate to the beginning fund balance or ending fund balance, that's money we wouldn't have to borrow. So I looked at this as making it fair for the people that have been here and paying all this time, for the people that are just now buying in.
How much would it add to the cost of construction prices now are just incredible. And they're going up by 10, 20, 30% in a year just for lumber alone, even more than that. But on I think we saw figures, the average price for a home around here is about $800,000. Somebody builds an $800,000 house. What is the SDC charge on that?
Well, it's not so much the size of the house as it is the size of the meter that is connecting to our system, if you will. So there's not a tremendous difference between an $800,000 house and a $300,000 house. It's how many connections are being added to our infrastructure. And so it's adding the capacity and the cost of which to do it. And because these rates haven't been looked at for a long time, what it costs us today to put that in is very different than what it cost us in 1996.
And Mike, if I can try to address that, if you look at the first scenario going across on an $800,000 house, doing math easy for me, if it was the current rate, it's about 0.5%. if it's the 8423, it's about 1%.
That's my point. Somebody's building $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 houses. Is this going to really force them to move somewhere else or not develop housing for people who want to live here? That's why I don't understand spreading this out over a period of time
I have to,
and making it up with the current rates because we didn't charge enough for the new stuff. Again, basically, in the last 20 years, a lot of people have been getting it right.
Yeah.
Okay, I thank you for presenting.
any more to add to that, Doug, than what we mentioned? Or we missed something here in the discussion relative to doing it now versus phasing it out when you're talking about an individual home versus a project?
Well, I think you guys have got this handled as far as the cost question and the percentage of cost and to what extent does this really burden a developer or a builder. It is one point that is often missed because a lot of our thinking in housing affordability is muddled and kind of ineffective. While SDCs do add dollar for dollar to the cost of building a house, that's completely different from the price of the house. The price of the house is determined in a marketplace, and it's determined by the willingness and the ability of the buyer to pay. Now, a developer may choose not to build if the cost of construction exceeds buyers' ability and willingness to pay, but that hasn't really been our problem anywhere. There's plenty of buyers who are able and willing to pay, and that's why they are outbidding a bunch of other buyers who are willing to pay, but they can't pay as much, and that's why the housing is unaffordable to them. So that's a long way of saying, yeah, this is not going to matter much.
It's kind of where I was going with my answer about the cost of 800,000 versus 300,000.
Point is, it just looks like a big number just by itself, but you know, 1%, 0.1%.
Right.
It's not preventing people from developing their product.
Correct.
And it's not going to reduce the price to make the house affordable by holding it down. So, all right.
Nancy, other questions that we didn't capture?
No, I think you did.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the first discussion, there was some current concerns about the potential impact of this to affordable housing. And I included, again, Jeff's map that he had given to you guys last year when he did one of his presentations that shows the remaining lots here in Cannon Beach. There's not a lot. And so when you look at these fees, we're talking new construction primarily. And so in the overall scheme of things, this is not huge. If only half of our town was built out, then I could see where we'd be looking at this a little bit differently, and especially if you were a community that wanted that, single family residence development in our town. It's really the opposite of that where we are.
It's interesting though, when you mention that, because in the affordable housing report that we got, I think it was the county's housing, it said the buildable acreage was something where around, I think 300, I don't know where they got the 300, at least 300 housing units, I think, that we still had available to build here. And I'm not sure where they're figuring that, but, and then the acreage was a lot more than I expected too. It was,
yeah,
30 something acres.
Jeff is here, so speak up if I misquote something here, but.
I want to defer that to when we talk
Yeah.
about housing, but yeah, that's one thing I would recommend you look at, because I just don't think, I agree with you. I think what they used was, you can see the footprint from the report that they included the property outside of our growth boundary and outside the city limits. And, you know, are you guys, you hadn't had that discussion, in my understanding,
No.
of annexation or where you want to go. So I think those are the kind of discussions you need to have going forward.
I have a kind of an interest in the fact that somebody who has a house and would like to either expand or add an ADU, and in that process would like to request another service line.
Mhm.
You're looking at about $2,000 added to that just for the water service SDC. Is that correct?
Well, it's good that you brought that up, because Doug and I had a conversation before the meeting, because I had some questions very similar to that concerning ADUs. If the idea is to encourage ADUs to be used as affordable housing, the majority of the ADUs that are going in now are being fed off the existing meters to the existing house. Very few of them are split out, very few.
And I talked to Jeff yesterday about just waiving the SDCs. If somebody wants to build an ADU, even.
But now you're talking like me, Mike. So Doug corrected me and said it wouldn't be waiving, it would be reimbursing. And if you guys were to take another look at your incentives to encourage that type of development, if you will, in Cannon Beach for long-term rentals, affordable housing, however you want to label it, you have your funding source, set aside, if you will, as some of those tax credits. Then if you were to change your code that incented and or encouraged the ADUs to be used for long-term rentals, as it stands today, they can't use them as short-term rentals. So if you were to further develop that, then you would have the option to reimburse for these SDCs under that affordable housing clause.
Yeah, obviously, when we do our code audit, we don't have to wait that long, but we can address it then for sure.
You've got a lot of flexibility there so that this does not hurt that goal for the city, and really kind of puts it where it's really supposed to be.
I'd like to bring up another question on this topic about the parks SDC is for improving and developing parks, correct?
It's to increase capacity, to cover the cost of increasing capacity to our infrastructure. Yes, development or redevelopment.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
But like I say, now we're doing nothing in the parks arena and or our roads arena, pretty much because we didn't have a TSP. So we weren't in a position to be able to charge for roads. But we've done a lot of street development that we weren't able to capture any funding support on. And so it's been these three: water, wastewater, and storm. And a long time that they haven't been modified. So this is.
So would this go toward the pocket parks, go toward ADA accessibility for the parks?
Anywhere where we're increasing capacity, if you.
Grounds?
Mhm. Yep. Not every project qualifies. That's why Doug and I went through the Parks Master Plan, and we got estimates for some of those projects that we felt could potentially go forward under this within that 20-year time frame. Kirk went over it. Barb and the Parks Committee were part of that. And so that's what the Parks SDCs were evaluated based on for this purpose.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, anybody else? I got my questions. Doug, have we missed anything that you were going to remind us?
I wanted to use this spreadsheet to kind of give you a sense of the possibilities of phasing in, if that's the direction that you wanted to go. You'll notice that there are a couple of different ways, actually 3 different ways shown here of getting all the way to the fully defensible amount. But you may recall, I've told you that there is no obligation on the city's part to implement the full defensible charge at any time. And so you are welcome to choose a lesser amount, and you could, if you wanted to, phase in to that lesser amount. Now here, I'm showing, contrary to what was printed, I've knocked this down to 73.9% just to show the figure that Mr. Neal used, and how you could get to that either in 3 years or 5 years. But really, the percentage, and you don't even have to use a percentage. I'm using it here for ease of use. But what you have in your printed version is this amount to get from 4,200 to 6,300. And then there are further gradations that are possible. Furthermore, all of these scenarios that I'm showing you show each SDC kind of being evenly increased over the period. You don't have to do that either. You could decide that it's super important, for example, that you get your water SDC up to as close to the maximum as possible, and maybe storm and parks are not as important. I mean, whatever the priorities are, you can choose to charge a higher percentage of the fully defensible charge in different SDCs if you want. It's just once you've chosen the SDCs you're going to impose, you need to treat all development equally, but you can treat different SDCs differently. There are a lot of options here.
I will say that there's been a lot of development over the last couple of years in areas that we did never expect to see houses built. And there are areas where we have no storm drainage on the streets. And we've had to expend quite a bit of money putting pipe in and storm drains, culverts and whatnot to be able to deal with that growth. And our storm SDCs are not where they should be. So I wouldn't downplay the storm aspect of it. It's just as important, if not more so, than our water and stormwater, our water and wastewater.
And just to think about the sensitivity we have with utility rates, specifically water, virtually everything that's going to happen in phase 1, well, no, I'm sorry, phase 2 and phase 3, I would be shocked if we didn't end up putting in a larger water tank, or somewhat larger lines to carry more water from the springs. So that's all capacity issues. And if we have cash, we don't have to borrow.
Adding our backbone along 101 is all brand new infrastructure that we're having to put in. And so that's factored into this.
So the water rates have to carry that expense.
Yes, and we did an adjustment in the water rates with you guys that carry us all the way through phase 2 of your water resiliency project. So we're covered to that point. But then when we get to the tank and the backbone along 101, we'll come back and have that same discussion again. Lori's working on some stuff for us now to be able to bring to you.
So are you saying, I think my guess, I'm just asking again, are you saying that if we didn't institute the SDC charges, that the water rates might have to go up because of these projects?
It's a strong possibility. Again, that's a question Lori has to answer for me after she does the evaluation.
I think that just intuitively, if you have more cash on hand, you're able to go ahead and apply that. If you don't, you have to make that up with rates because you're going to borrow. So I think that pretty much the answer is going to be, you're going to have to increase rates if you don't have cash on hand. Now, they're gonna go up anyway, but the amount that they have to go up is higher if you don't have, money in reserve.
Mike has made a good argument for just starting from the year one. I was the one who I think I proposed the phasing it a little bit. And I still kind of think that phasing it for two arguments. One is, I know there's somebody out there that is in the contemplating and estimating and financing their planned project, but they haven't quite got to the permit phase yet. I'd like to capture that a little, give them a little bit of a leeway, just because it seems so sudden to just all of a sudden, boom. I understand. I from our end, I think dropping it in at the current year or the 1 year right away. The other one is, I would also consider that I don't fully think we should go to the full maximum. But what I was thinking is if we phased it in through 3 years or 5 years, 3 years would be my preference. A future council could then say, oh, this is enough. And not go all the way. We could stop it at some point. But the plan would be, if they didn't say that, it would go all the way. So I don't know. I understand Mike's argument, though. Getting it as soon as possible is.
You could always set it up so that the parties that have an application pending.
Well, I think that'd be automatic. There's just that next group, just before.
Pay it too for 6 months or something like that.
Yeah, but that's still a hard line. I'm making it, by doing a phase in, it's a grayer line. You don't pay as much, but you still have to pay more.
You can start it whenever you want. I mean, that option is completely yours to select that start date. Even if you said yes to me tonight, it's going to be another 2 months because I have to bring the ordinance back to you for approval that we have to change to support this. So it wouldn't happen as quickly as sometime we think.
And I agree. I don't think anybody's going to just drop their project because it's $8,000 more.
No.
That's going to be, I saw a rate increase that much on buying a car from what they told me it was going to cost till the car got there and they told me what it was going to cost. So, I mean, with all the other things that are there, cost of materials, all that, I think this will be a relatively small part of.
I think we're just trying to finesse something that doesn't need.
I would rather put all this effort into figuring out better ways to reinforce workforce housing of some kind. If that is a different way of granting money to help pay for these things, yes. Having this firm and set is important.
I think, I'm not sure that these funds could be used for workforce housing.
That's not what I said.
Sorry.
What I said is figuring out another way
Sure.
to help grant funds from other sources.
Yeah.
To help reinforcing to pay for these.
No, but these funds can be waived. And yes, I'm aware of what it needs to be, but it's reallocated. And if the project meets the criteria for our current, sorry, the name is escaping me, but the tax that comes out of
Housing excise tax?
yes. If someone were to propose a project that meets those criteria, we can waive the system development charge and have it repaid through that fund.
You couldn't waive, but you could reimburse.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I am well aware of my terminology, which leads me to another point that I would like to bring up, two of them. One is that we do have to come back and revisit this once our TSP plan is, that will inevitably raise this again. And I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that as well. I'd like to know what we can do so that we can ensure that this is revisited in a more timely fashion in the future rather than waiting like we've done all this time since, what, 1996? It just seems like we've missed a real opportunity.
Yeah, we can make that part of the, first of all, we have to update our strategic plan. But that's the kind of place you can put it in, that the SDCs will be reviewed, in this year, the next time. Now, we have some of those now that were missed, but that is a way to kind of put that in, or possibly put it in.
I have a better idea, because strategic plans never seem to work out. Put a sunset on it, so that some future council has to address it. I don't know if you can. That's a,
Probably can. Kind of a,
rather than putting a carrot up in front of some future, maybe we might on a strategic plan, give them a hammer and say, okay, you're not gonna get these funds if you don't do something. That's a better way to do it. I don't know if Doug has a comment on that.
Like Brandon says, it'd be a perfect time for council to take another look at it. We don't know that any of the projects that y'all decide to move forward on would qualify. Doug would have to review those and see if they're qualifying projects. But it would be a good time for you guys to be able to take another look at it.
This was some of the thinking that was going on in Hermiston when we did their STCs, and their approach was to set up a long-term phase-in that marched all the way, I believe, all the way to the fully defensible SDCs. And if nobody did anything, that's where the SDCs were going. And so it's sort of the opposite of sunsetting, but it achieves the same goal, because anything that takes the SDC on autopilot out of the acceptable range will trigger somebody to do something about it.
Yeah.
Good point.
And by the way, these numbers that we have put in front of you, this is more inspiration than something that you'd want to just immediately paste into an ordinance. Because we would need to get a little more granular on the individual SDCs. Although the total column is completely feasible and accurate. There would need to be some reshuffling of, for example, the glaring example is because the stormwater SDC needs to come down. It will need to come all the way down right away, because you can't justify a fee greater than the $424. So there will need to be some reshuffling, but the total, if you focus on the totals and the impact of phasing on the totals, that's completely accurate.
Karen, did the totals contemplate the presidential's outfalls?
No, because at the time we did this, we had no idea if we were going to move forward on that or not.
Yeah, that's going to be a big ticket. And I'm not sure it actually adds capacity, so I don't know if it would have been eligible.
It did include 7th and Oak.
Okay.
Okay, what else do we need for feedback for you guys?
Just some direction.
And now comes the hard part.
Well, and I'm looking at the 3-year. I think that's adequate.
At 100%, Sam.
Up to 100%, yeah. And that gives us time to tweak it, like they're saying, still. Obviously, if the stormwater has to be done immediately, changes that. But it gives you an idea where you can start playing the balances. That's just mine. I understand my point of view, though.
Yeah, I could just see doing it once but not having it become effective for some 6 months, 9 months to address Sam's concern with somebody that's already making plans, but they haven't yet quite filed their permit application. And then we don't have to administratively going back through, oh, God, we got to change that. We forgot to change it. I don't know how that's going to work. It's not an ordinance, it's a fee. Change, somebody's going to have to address it and make it timely. And it just seems like an administrative burden that doesn't gain anything. Matter of fact, we lose, but doesn't offer any real reason for not doing it just once. And have a window before it becomes effective.
Yeah, I'd like to see it being done once, but maybe the word inspirational bothers me a little as far as the accurate numbers. So maybe look at that a little more.
I think that's what Doug was recommending, to get down more specific on the numbers.
Yeah, yes.
I'm a little surprised that the stormwater is so important. It's going to be some big expenses coming up. And yet the number says we should be reducing our SDC and stormwater. I think maybe you ought to take another hard look at that.
Well, it's pretty much because we don't know what we don't know. I can't really define a project for him when I don't know what lots are going to be developed. So I couldn't, if we had a development planned, and I could tell Doug, okay, we know this development's going to happen, and that street and the two that are surrounding it have no drainage, then I could define that as a project, and I could cost estimate that, and he could add that in here as a definitive cost. But because I don't know, I can just look at the lots that we have left, and I can speculate that if all those lots got developed, what I would be facing to have to put storm drainage in. But that's not really a reality. It's not a project that's in our master plan that I can define the cost of it. So I won't really know until we get a set of plans in and I go, okay, I know I've got to extend the storm line from the closest point. That may be 200 or 300 feet.
That's another reason to revisit this in a couple of years.
Well, and it's also the unique situation, as you referred to before, is that we don't have these large tracts of land that we can predict where development, it's all going to come from infill.
Exactly.
So I think with an eye towards that, exactly as Mike said, but at the same time, were to guess, I'd say it wouldn't be any sooner than a couple of years that we have to revisit it to add on the TSP component.
Yeah, I think that would be a fair estimate.
I think that there's another aspect, when Karen's talking about, she doesn't know what's, underground or whatever conditions, those kind of things. But there's a lot of lines have just been in the ground for a very long time. And there's backups because of capacity issues. So it may be a line that was maybe, a 12-inch that was adequate for a long time, but maybe it should be 14 or 16 now to carry the water. So and that's strictly a capacity issue. So because I do see one of the things that I think that we're short on is drainage in the city. Something we could be doing better.
Okay, good. I'm trying to wrap it up here, but I don't want to stop anybody.
Well, I tend to agree with Mike and Robin about doing it all at once, maybe delaying it for 6 months, at least putting it into effect maybe in 6 months.
But to start in 6 months.
Yeah, start in 6 months or so.
Okay, from what I'm hearing is a one-time implementation, 6 months from now. And I think when we get a little more detail then on balance of the numbers, maybe we could talk about how high we go, if we go to the max or not.
Okay,
Okay?
yep. Doug, any questions?
So that's still, so you want you're looking at a one-time change. It's just, you're not sure how much of a change.
Well,
I think we were looking, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I still support the 8,400 because I don't want rates to be increased, water rates to be increased if we can avoid it. I mean, increased is more than what they're already going to be increased. So I'm still for the 8,400. I know it sounds like a lot of money and I kind of gasped at it myself, but if it's what it is, that's what it is.
But Doug, I think the next step was for you, is to use your word, was to look at these rates at a more granular level to essentially refine them. And that's what we would bring back to council for approval.
Oh, I see. If we're, that's absolutely true. But if we go with a one-time change, then even the detailed numbers are true here. So it will be exactly like this.
Okay.
It's just like the first line, that if we go at a one-time implementation.
Okay.
As long as you're bringing that stormwater down all the way to the new fully defensible, then all the rest of the numbers are accurate as well. So this is what it will be.
Delay the start for 6 months.
I just wanted to make sure to understand that if you wanted to go less than 100%, then you could not have all the different SDCs go up at the same rate, but that's not relevant if you're doing it 100%. So this is what it will be.
One last question, Doug. I mean, at least for me. Allegedly. The 944 and the 424 for drainage, because you've done, somewhat of a study on it and said, well, the numbers don't support 944. Are we under an obligation to change it to 474, whatever the number is, 424? Or can we leave that until we have a little bit more time to study drainage?
If you find, this is tricky. If you find the methodology to be fundamentally sound, then you kind of have an obligation to say, oh, okay, it looks like we can't defend anything higher than 424. And so you do kind of, unless you reject the methodology, now you could say, oh, well, this is just wrong. But if it's not wrong, then you can't really support more than $424 for stormwater.
And I was not questioning the methodology. It was just a timing issue. So I get it. We'll leave it, go down to 424.
So Doug, I think what Bruce has in the back of his mind is we have 5 storm drains that we may have to completely redesign and reconstruct, increasing capacity in our presidential. So we know that's going to be a sizable project. I think he's contemplating leaving it at the 944 number, knowing that if that project goes forward, and it's likely that it might, we could most definitely defend that number based on that project. Now, if that project doesn't go forward, then we're back to the 424, which we could absolutely defend in our current projects.
Right. Now we've submitted to
We submitted.
Yeah, we have submitted.
RD.
Do we have a dollar amount on the proposal?
Well, we do. We have 3 different options, and the proposal that's in front of them right now, we have a dollar amount, but they haven't even begun to give us an answer yet.
If that could be somehow put into the equation, again, it wouldn't be questioning the methodology. It would be, we have more data now, and then see what that number comes out to
So you're
be.
suggesting that I give that number to Doug and let him see where that puts us as far as the 424 versus the 944? Am I understanding that?
Well, it's a conversation between you and I, but we were looking for direction from you.
What about just doing what Bruce is suggesting, but doing it when we go in and evaluate the TSP
Mhm.
and then have update the SDCs on the stormwater at that time?
Okay, we can get the information and ask Doug just to do a, crank that in.
I think streets are gonna have some impact on stormwater, depending on what those street projects.
Most definitely.
I would say updating both stormwater and the transportation component with the proper technique and make the adjustments when those things are ready to go.
Okay.
So,
I only have then one, hopefully one last question. Is everybody comfortable going to the 100%?
I am.
I am.
I'm not in just that. I understand the need for the money and agree with it, but unless I were to know that there was a set time at which a council in the future would look at this again, I believe we're tying council's hands in the future to not being able to raise it. That may not be as much of a concern as it should be, but it's at least a question I have.
Okay, same question.
Diminishes my support for 100% increase.
I would think that if there was another study done based on, new costs, new projects, then they would have a new number in front of them that would substantiate if they wanted to do an increase or they were looking as to whether or not they were collecting enough, that would give them the data to do it.
Well, I mean, your point is well taken, but since 1996, we've, incurred any number of increased costs and we haven't done a thing about it.
That's my concern, yeah.
Yeah, how do we assure that future councils or future staff will take a fresh look at SDCs in 5 years or 8 years or, whatever that is? There'll be administratively some process where you have a tickler file that says, oh, it's time to do this.
Well, I could easily see an argument made for, incrementally raising them every 5 years, just out of a need.
Really studying them.
Yes.
Give Lori the timeline.
Make sure Lori's here for the next 5 years. Okay,
Security.
I think we got a pretty good
Exactly.
research for you.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Let's figure out where I'm at here. We're at Rick, it looks like.
Well, Rick is coming up, so I'll tell you.
I'm gonna,
I had an uncle that told me one time, he says, he was an older gentleman, they're gonna live at least 5 years. I said, how'd you know that? He said, well, I just bought a new car and I know the bank won't let me die until I pay it off.
I'm gonna ask that Rick go ahead and get started. I just have to run to the restroom
Yeah.
quick, so go ahead and get started.
I was gonna say, Sam, you know most of this.
Some of it. Rick.
Thank you, council. I will use some acronyms tonight, but SDC will not be one of them.
thank God.
2 years ago, when I started with you full-time, February 2020, I promised you guys a 3-year development plan for emergency management. I don't think I'm going to make that mark. COVID was a little bit drawn out and still with us, hopefully be ending soon. And there were some distractions in that period of time, but we learned a lot. And I'd like to go through this tonight and talk to you about where our plan is, what we're doing now. And then later on, when we get into budget and other dynamics, we can talk more specifically about where we're going. But the one thing that's really exciting about it is the big heavy lift that I was concerned about getting off the ground is off the ground and we're moving forward. And I'm excited about that. So every month when we send you guys notifications of what we've been working on every month, there's a reason why there's a long list of things underneath my title. And it really has to do with these 4 sections: mitigation, preparedness, response and recovery. When you're in a position and you're an unprepared community, like a lot of places in Oregon are, you don't really have the luxury to prioritize one at a time, finish that project and move to the next. You have to start moving forward because all of them have an effect when it comes to emergency operations of any kind. And we're talking about them. We talk about this with infrastructure, with the TSP and with public works and law enforcement and fire and developing these programs. And all these things have a big impact. So it's so many disciplines and they all take take out quite a bit of time and they have high priorities. So in mitigation, I'll start with that section right now. Public education, hazardous vulnerability assessments and improved infrastructure. We're going to go through those things and we're going to be able to highlight some of those things as we go through them. And at the same time, we always have emergency response plans, training exercises, and recently we've even had things like sirens that have come up to sponsor what we're going to start doing next, right? In the response, we have life safety, incident stabilization, evacuation shelters, and mass care, which we've actually been working on developing those at all times. And then recovery. Recovery efforts are always something that we've been dealing with. And it's a tough thing to get to because if you never get past those first three, you can never get to the recovery. So let's start with mitigation. Mitigation has been an interesting part that we've been dealing with employee education and also public education. What's happened with public education, moreover, is we've improved our website. We've made the emergency management website a lot more user-friendly, and there's still a lot of information on there, and we still need a lot of work to get that to where it's really leaned down and looking the way we want to. But we've had a huge amount of community outreach. Community outreach really started when COVID hit, and we started with situational reports, and I started giving those reports and updates because things were always changing and constantly in motion, and it required daily research to give factual information. Well, those situational reports ended up turning into the community notification list, and in 2021, we had about 75 people at the very beginning of that year on that community notification list. And recently, especially after the tsunami event, after we put out some more of those information updates to please get onto that, we had about 440 members. Is that about right? Okay, so when you look at that number from about 75 to about 440 in a 12-month period of time, that is a huge increase of letting your community know on a daily basis what's going on. It's a big number for us. We're very proud of that number. And it means we're getting the word out. And it also means that we're going in the right direction. And with that community notification list, a couple of things came out of that. We realized that you have to be more informative in a different platform than just an email. And so the bulletin actually came out of that concept. And the bulletin started off with an idea, and that idea was something that's now even changing to something even better. It's becoming a better vehicle that we're going to use. And it is labor intensive to make that vehicle work. But it's also important that we respect the fact that people are inundated with messages every single day. And we want to make sure that whatever we put out is factual, it's timely, it's education, and it's to keep the community informed. So on an emergency level beyond the bulletin, we also have Clatsic Alerts and Nixle. Those two things are a county-driven machine, and it's also a state-driven machine with Everbridge. And then there's the Nixle response. One thing that was interesting about the last event that we just had is we learned how effective those two tools were, but we also got a lot of people to pay attention to it and actually sign up for the Nixle. So just like the community notification list that got improved and enhanced with a lot more people, so did the Nixle. The good thing about the Nixle response is that that's done by our local law enforcement, and those are immediate actions that affect the people here every day. And that's something that we can send out quickly. Clatsic Alerts is similar, but we don't have total control over those for this global area. So we're pretty happy to see that that's also improving at the same time. When I first started here, I didn't really know a lot about those platforms, but those are the adjustments that we've made along the way. In 2021, we've made a lot of them. Another one of the mitigation efforts we've done with community outreach has been Wayfinding Wednesdays. Wayfinding Wednesdays has actually turned into, in my opinion, kind of a fun social aspect that's actually highlighted not only our community, but it's also highlighted our ability to monthly train our radios. And so we put it to the test, and it works out quite well. And in September, we do a 6 straight weeks with that month of Preparedness Month. And it goes right into the Great Shakeout. And so it's not just for the community. I also do a lot of training and a lot of mitigation efforts with employee training during that whole 6-week period of time. And it leads up to when we get to the Great Shakeout, we're kind of exhausted with emergency management concepts. But what it's done is it's really tested what we can do on a daily basis. And it's got people to where it's a normal concept to practice some of these emergency procedures and it not be a big, heavy lift. One thing that really happened in 2021 that I'm mostly proud of is probably when you look at the 2007 weather event, and everybody talks about that weather event because it meant a lot to them and it was a huge impact on them and they really do remember it. But I'll be honest with you, when I first got here, there wasn't a lot of changes to that, to mitigation efforts when it came down to what happened in that event. And the key thing was communications. So in 2021, we were able to finish that project and really bring that radio antenna. And it's not just a radio antenna, it's emergency communications from KMUN, which is now you have redundancy with different formats and different platforms being used. You have a radio channel that's on the coast that's able to give us emergency broadcasting and updates. We also had ham and GMRS added to that. And it gave us a standalone location. Cannon Beach is such an interesting geographic place that we are in a difficult bowl here for radio communications. And it gave us a platform to basically shoot from, to where no matter what happens, as long as we have a standing radio tower with power there, which we should have the ability to communicate in and out of this community. And I'm pretty happy about that. We also added satellite and internet capabilities to our EOCs and we improved those concepts. And we'll talk a little bit about the MRC that added something to it a lot. But when we improve a lot of the communications and we start getting the volunteers to use these emergency communications in a habit, then when anything happens in a negative or distressing, they're going to be able to use it and it won't be difficult to be able to lift up. One thing that was really exciting too is the MRC, the Medical Reserve Corps, which is another one of our feathers in our caps here that we're very proud of. They've been working on this project for a while, and the Medical Reserve Corps radio really connects the entire the county to a medical health preparedness organization to the hospitals. And they have the ability as the Medical Reserve Corps in the entire county to communicate to the hospitals with locals in the towns that they live in. And this specific radio tower that was put in, it was put in by Health Preparedness Organization grants, private donations. It was also sponsored by the city and the county we were able to get some resources out of the county and we built it. And it was on the drawing plans for years to happen. And it really happened pretty quickly once we really put our efforts to it. And so in this community, we have this, and it really links Arch Cape and Falcon Cove to Cannon Beach and to Seaside, which is something that's hard to do. It's difficult to have any communications that lead us all the way from a hospital down to Falcon Cove. It's almost impossible. And it does it right here. The cache site development, as you can see a picture there, I can remember what the cache sites looked like in 2019. And, they had some potential. They really did. But we were able to develop the cache sites, especially in 2021. And what we added to them was kind of a maintenance plan. So we started working on them in 2020 pretty hard of getting them organized, adding some Connex boxes and some storage facilities to them, and developing the idea with kind of a vision of what we could do with them over the next few years. And we were fortunate enough to partner with Red Cross and get some shelters for their equipment, but we've been just adding to them and we've been improving them. And so I'm very pleased with the fact that they don't have to grow and look a lot different and be an eyesore, but what they can be is developed and maintained and kept looking classy to where they're something that will really, in a pinch, they're going to work more than a little bit, they're going to work a lot. You see the Tango site there where we actually have more Connex boxes to where we have the dark Connex box for animal readiness on the far right side, but we also have a communications box at that site with CERC And we have heavy equipment with some of our locals that when they have work that are done in this area, they have the ability to stage their equipment at that site. And that keeps that equipment here locally in case there's an emergency. And you can't pay for that. If you ever need that kind of equipment, you just can't buy it when you need it. It's got to be here. So we're excited that that site's growing and getting developed. Something that's happening inside the sites, though, is we're putting more shelving and more tools and equipment in there. So if something does happen, we can add more things to these cache sites. We can improve the functionality of them, the storage capacity, and we improve the community barrel program to where it's a lot more organized. We have a plan to where we open up the cache sites twice a year to the community to where they can service their own barrels, but it's also used to open it up to where people can see how they're operating. What I'm hoping to do this next year with the CERT's assistance is really develop the cache sites to where we know how to open them up. The CERT teams can be really instrumental in not only opening them up, but deploying all the resources and making them functional with support from the community. And that's what it's going to take. And so hopefully next year we really get to that. EOC development is ongoing. We are still in the process of adding radio antennas and fixed antennas to this building. Right underneath this monitor here, if you look at that black case, we have a satellite phone underneath it, and we have ham and GMRS radios inside that case. What we need to add to the building are hard fixed antennas with wires that lead to a certain port, and we can just roll that radio cabinet over and plug them in. And those need to be added to both City Hall and EOC, Public Works EOCs to really develop them a little bit more. But we're getting close. I'd say this year we should be done by mid-year of fully developing the EOCs. One thing that comes with what my tasks are emergency plans. This year we were able to develop 6 emergency operation guidelines. Think about the emergency operation guidelines they have to be usable, understandable, and repeatable. And as you guys especially the community notification list, whenever there was something that happened, whether there was a big storm event and we had some type of severe weather happening, I would attach these to the notification list and get people reminded, and if they had the chance to read them, if they had a chance to look at them, they would realize that, oh, okay, this is how the weather service warns the communities. And then here's how the community, the city is geared up to help the community. And hopefully it educates them at a very quick fashion of what's the responsibility of the city, what's the responsibility of the public safety experts, and then what does the citizens need to do? And I would try to add those also with some other things like go bags and how to basically keep themselves safe. I think if we keep on that track with keeping things easily to understand and reliable, and then remind people on occasions, I think what it becomes is a habit. It's a habit of safety in a city. So even when visitors come here, and this is common knowledge to the hoteliers and the other members in the community that maybe have part-time houses here, then they feel safer in this environment. One thing that I want to try to bring more to the community, and I'm looking forward to when COVID kind of backs off and allows us to get together more in a safer fashion, is community exercises. When the community understands, whether you're using emergency volunteers or just a concerned citizen in your neighborhood, when they understand what the city's going to do and what the expectations are, they'll take action. And I truly believe that people are much more confident if they know that what their neighbors are going to do. And when people get comfortable with these basic guidelines on what's expected out of them, then they become ready for all hazards. And it's not really planning for Cascadia. It's really planning for the small, medium events and getting very, very good at those events and how we function in the city. And that's where I think these guidelines really need to live in the future. We also developed a communication plan in 2021. The communication plan, along with the hardware that we put in the infrastructure, when you look at that little map that we created there, it creates everything in an envelope to where you can function in a small area and just have that area communicate with itself, or you can communicate globally from the top of the town to the south of the town in a few different fashions. It's not just one, whether it's a GMRS, General Mountain Radio Service, or a ham network, or it's cell phones or satellites. You have the ability to communicate on multiple levels. We also have included the Alpha Division. The Alpha Division is everything south of us, whether it's Arcadia and Arch Cape and down into Falcon Cove. We have definitely added our friends down there to the south because there's no representation of them down there. And we want to make sure that we were able to put our arms around them when the moment needs happens. And that's why it's important to have relationships with the county on communications on how they do business. But it's also important for them down there to realize if they just model what we're doing and they can participate, they can be part of this communications plan. They don't have to reinvent that wheel. We used our communication plans and we also assisted HRAP and other parts of the city that were outliers that don't have a communications plan. We were able to give them radios and put them inside this communications plan to where everybody's operating on the same page. So what we have is the ability for police, fire, public works, city staff, HRAP, and CERT to all operate on the same system with their own channels and to have a format of how we do that. So we can operate on small, tiny levels of discipline, but we can also grow the system very quickly on a catastrophic event. We've done a lot of training this year, not as much as I'd like to do on training, but this is where COVID had a big impact on us. We only had a couple of times this year to where we were able to operate in groups and train as a group setting and do tabletop exercises. We had many scares. We had 6 waves of COVID run through in the past 2 years, as you guys are all aware of them. And almost all those times changed how we did business, whether it was mask mandates that increased separation, whether it was keeping City Hall closed, opening it for a couple of days here, and then we have to react. So our training has been very challenged with how we actually exercise it as a group. But we were able to get a few things worked out here. And where we really shine here is really with our public works team. Our law enforcement and fire departments, they already operate together on a daily basis, but our public works teams don't operate all the time as a working group. And when we put them to the task, they do extremely well. And really, whenever you guys hear about all the little weather events that we react on, that's your public works team out there working. And one thing I want to always bring to you guys is this. When you guys don't hear bad news, that means we're doing a good job. When you hear very little, when you hear nothing, that means everybody's working and everybody's doing such a good job that you don't hear the mess. And I can't tell you how many times that happens. I'll talk to Jason or I'll talk to Chief Reckman or Karen and I'll ask them what happened over the weekend, and they've got horror stories, right? But you didn't hear about them. They handled it. And it's so impressive to see that happen. And so when we do these little training exercises, it's really a great opportunity for us to see how well everybody works together and how good of a job they're doing. But there is more that needs to be done, and we're looking forward to capitalizing it next year. One thing that we did last year too is we also faced some challenges, and we talked about things that haven't been talked about in a long time. We got the Department of Forestry, and we did a ECFR along with Greenwood and Pacific Power, and we got everybody out in the same footprint, and we did a really hard search about what is this forest working for us? What are our challenges? What do we need to fix, and where do we need to attack it? And the things that happened in that big study that we got everybody out in the woods when we could is we identified a couple of things. We don't have good plans between Department of Forestry and our internal ECFR for fire protection. And I'm very hopeful this next year that we put in some plans to fix that. And also one thing that we figured out was the aging infrastructure of the power lines coming through our community. And what happened with that? What happened because we chose to attack this and really look at it is Pacific Power raised their hand and said, we need to start getting your fixes done now. And we need to start scheduling them quickly. And but we even had a couple of moments to where we had power failures and some small fires in the ECFR, and it happened shortly after we did this, and we didn't have any downtime in getting in touch with them and them telling us exactly when the scheduled repairs are going to be, and we got those things put on a fast track to get fixed for our community. So it's another example of how important it is to dive into the challenges of infrastructure and how we're really going to react in order to answer some of these things that you don't see every day. And so that was something I'm very proud of that happened. And the relationships that we built during that period of time, they're nothing but getting better. We call each other all the time. We're on text. We get email all the time whenever there's anything's going on, and our collaboration has improved drastically. And it happened really because of that. What we did at the end of last year, though, also is we had a state recognition from Oregon Emergency Management, and mostly it came out of the Department of Human Services. And I'm not sure if you guys understand the whole story about it, but in 2020, when Oregon had its wildfire incidents, they only had one person at Oregon Emergency Management in charge of mass care for the whole state. And they realized very quickly that they are so outgunned and they are in such a bad position that they started a new division in human services, and they hired some really super talented people, and they started building a team, and that team is now 50 strong and growing. And that team, fortunately for us, is we were able to contact them, and I'd known some of the members on that team right off the bat. And I was able to kind of hang with them as they started developing a mass care plan for the entire state. And I was fortunate enough that they accepted an invitation to come out here in December. And working with us, I was able to give them the staff right around the city and show them not only our city, but the whole area. And they are the right people to be talking with, because the things that we're doing correctly here is the things that they are doing correctly. And so we're all in concert with what's going to happen next. And so I'm very excited about that relationship with them and understanding exactly how, if something catastrophic happens. When I first got here, I didn't have a lot of confidence. After meeting with these people and working with them since then, I have a lot of confidence that we're on the right track, and that they have a plan to fix these problems. So that's something that really has got me excited about where they're going. The cows, coastal outside alarm system. That's something that I never really had anything other than a vision for. And until the fire district really said that we don't want them anymore, I'm trying to grab my hands around that very much to say, time out, let's talk about these. And they are very responsive. They really do just want a partner with the city. They need some help in that area. And recently we've had the representatives out here from Wayland to do a review of the sites. And one thing that was very excited about participating in this, and this just happened last week, is we went around to all of the geographic locations, and we looked at the system, and we got some perspective from one of their experts. And one thing that's really exciting about the system is it was laid out extremely well. And that's what was said, is this system was laid out really well. And this was a third-party person that works for them as a representative. But they weren't around when this was developed. Okay. And that was really encouraging to see, that is that this was laid out well. We just need to do some improvements and put a plan together. And then after the tsunami event that happened January 15th, we realized the downside of not having this plan and these tools modified, maintained, and have a vision for what they can be used for. And I think the vision for what it can be used for, it won't take that much to get it up and running, but we'll be able to use that in this area. And I'm really hopeful that it spreads countywide. Part of our tour is I went up to Warrenton, and they have a plan to install several of these as well. They're behind us, but they have a plan to add them. And my goal is that they add them and improve them, as we are going to do as well, if you guys decide to take this project on. But that's something that happened recently, and that's another thing that'll add to the resiliency of this community. When it comes down to the response, I'm now on the third out of the fourth wheel of emergency management. There's an outside response and there's an inside response. When we look at the outside response of Oregon Emergency Management, you look at the state's responsibility, the county's responsibility, and how local law enforcement and fire department deals with them. Those relationships are getting better, but we've also highlighted some challenges that are happening in our county. And I think with better support from the county, and the key is we're talking directly to the county leaders, including the emergency manager and the county manager, and they want to improve the system for the county for sure. It's not a matter of want. They want to do it, and I think it's going to happen very soon. And Office of Emergency Management, I think they're on a good turn up to do a better job. And they learned a lot from the 2020 wildfires. So they're learning those lessons. I think our law enforcement and fire service, we've been talking about those improvements lately, especially with the fire department needed to improve what they've been doing. So when you look at all those exterior responses that impact our internal responses, I think the awareness is much higher than it was 2 years ago. The communications and the relationships are definitely more bolden. But if you look at our internal responses, not just law enforcement and fire service, but you look at the public works, the volunteers and our city staff, I think we've done a lot to improve our abilities to operate on a medium and small emergencies and do an extremely good job with those. When you look at the infrastructure in the city that the public works is going on and some of the big challenges that the city's tackling, those are really big long-term. And so when you look at these responses, you have to go internally and externally of what would happen. One thing that's also on a new level is Dagami. I've been working with Dagami pretty intimately, and you guys are going to see some changes when it comes to their mapping locally. I'm waiting for some of that material to get finalized. And we're going to be having a town hall meeting with Dagami to tell us the changes that they've discovered. And we're going to move some things forward. And it's all good. All of it is to keep us more aware and safer. One thing I want to remind everybody of what happened last year and even in 2019 is that natural disasters do not discriminate. They absolutely do not. And so when you look at the things that happened, the 2020, or not only the COVID pandemic, but the 2020 wildfires were a 100-year record. And 2021 winter storm was a 50-year winter storm that killed quite a bit of people. And then there was a June heat wave in 2021 that killed 107 people, which is tragic, very tragic. So the one thing that I just want to remind us is it's easy for us to be focused on what we're doing locally. And some of these things don't affect us. That heat wave didn't affect us that badly. The winter storm did affect us, but not like it did just over the Cascade Range. But it doesn't take much to affect us. And we have to just remember that at all times. So the more we are prepared and the more resilient we are, the better we'll be able to handle one of those things if it does hit us. The last thing I really want to dive down to is our emergency volunteers. They are absolutely amazing. If I would ask Jason right now how many law enforcement officers are on duty in Cannon Beach, he would tell me 1. How about the entire county? What do you think? How many law enforcement officers are in charge right now or on duty in the county?
15.
15 law enforcement in the entire county. I was talking to other fire officials recently, and there's as many as probably 18 during business hours, and at max about 9. After business hours is about 9 paid firefighters and 15 police officers, law enforcement. So we have to use our volunteers, and we are very fortunate that our volunteers. So when we talk about things like budget and how we actually support the community, you have to realize how important those conversations are. And you guys, I'm preaching the choir, but it's how important is this community when it comes down to supporting the emergency volunteers with tools, equipment, training, and actually having a backbone to give them the things that they need. It's critical. And we do a great job at it. And this is just a couple of pictures of us taking advantage of wood out there, and they didn't hesitate. That brought 10 cords of wood to our cache sites. But little things like our Medical Reserve Corps, and believe it or not, I didn't want to do anything specific for the volunteers tonight because it's too big of a conversation. In March, next month, we're going to have one on the second Tuesday. I want to talk a lot about just the volunteers and give them some special recognition. But I want to highlight a few things here. Our Cannon Beach Medical Reserve Corps represents the entire county. So what did they do during COVID? It was freaking amazing. Not only did they help out, and a lot of them also assist with the CERT team, but they were so instrumentally involved in vaccinations and MRC trainings that, believe it or not, probably about 40 to 50% of all the volunteers that work for Clatsop County during the vaccination and COVID came out of this city. And most of them were MRCs and CERTs. And that's just an incredible number, the amount, but that would never have happened if they weren't already geared up and supported. And so those volunteers are incredible. And some of the people that are running them are unbelievable. Lila Wickham is off the charts amazing. So what does not only the training and the radio communications and the organization of what she brings to the community, but it's also the county. But she also got incredible amount of grant funding. In 2021, she got $17,000 from the Health Preparedness Organization, and that really went to the MRC radio and tool equipment, and then $5,000 for the NACHO grant, and that went to DART. So she wrote a grant for the DART. And then 2022, she had the same NACHO grant that came through, and then another $8,000. That's $35,000 in 2 years. I think she's made a lot more money than we dedicate to her budget. And it shows, because what were they able to do during COVID? They were able to do quite a bit. Pretty incredible. So that's our DART, Disaster Animal Response Team. Bob Kroll, who runs that organization, believe it or not, he has responded to at least 5 times last year to assistance from law enforcement and myself in Public Works with animals. Phone calls, picks up the phone, I'll be there in a second, or he's giving us advice. And that's pretty incredible to have that kind of individual there, knowing how many pets are important to the people that visit here and live here. And he's developing a program. And there's not another program like this in the county. He's been able to get supported funding, but he's also supported by us in the city here. But what he's building here is incredible. And it's going to last a long time, and it's going to make a difference. When you talk about Red Cross sheltering and how you actually shelter people long-term in case there's a major event, you have to keep the animals and people kind of separate. And he's already way ahead of that. And that's really, really important. He's done a fantastic job. Then the CERT team. Our CERT team with the volunteers has been pretty amazing, and they wanted to do more during COVID. They really did. But believe it or not, there wasn't really any infrastructure damage for them to participate in. But what did they do? They did things in 2020 that we had talked about researching people and trying to find out where the vulnerable population went. But what did they do in 2021? They kept doing mass deliveries. They were hugely important in the volunteers when it came down to getting people signed up for vaccinations. And so they went from COVID and masks to vaccinations, and they didn't miss a beat. They also did firework enforcement patrols, cache site improvements. They're the ones that open up the cache sites when we open them up every 2 years or twice a year in order for people to come see the cache sites and participate in the barrel program. They participate in Wayfinding Wednesdays, and they make this place a habit to be safe. And they did a lot during the 211 or the hotlines for the 211 service. So pretty incredible. This little bottom picture that we had was us operating at the library where we had internet connection and power. And that was quite fun because that was early in the vaccination process. And during that vaccination process, there was a lot of people that were confused about how to get it when they were that vulnerable population. I think we signed up, I want to say about 24 people, which, does that sound about right, Sam?
Let's say over the different times.
Over the period of time, yeah, and it was pretty good. I really enjoyed that part, but it was really, really helpful, and it was thrown together quite quickly. Something I can't overstate enough is our relationship with Sunset Empire Amateur Radio Club. If it wasn't for them, we would not have gotten our system built as fast as we did. It would have cost us so much more. And these are locals that live here that participate in the training and the buildup of these. They also bridge the gap down in Arch Cape with putting those repeaters up and practicing this stuff and all the way into Falcon Cove. It can't be understated enough how much I thank you guys for saying yes to that relationship and participating and funding them, because it is paid off in spades. And they do this training ongoing. And these are people just like us that are just working every day or doing whatever they're doing every day and making it happen. And most of them don't live in our community, but they definitely participate in our community. And there's the Red Cross. And one thing that's interesting about being friends with that person in that picture is some of these people, they have multiple disciplines. They participate in everything and they ask for nothing. And one thing that the Red Cross did is represented that was most amazing, though, realistically, was blood drives. COVID made a huge decrease in the amount of blood supplies that there was, and it was scary. And Red Cross had not been here for years because they didn't get a lot of support. And so it wasn't a place that they could land and have a good supply. They've been here, I think, 11 times since COVID started, and they want to come back here, and they keep, and every single time we fill up every schedule. So thank you to the citizens of Cannon Beach, but also the people that put on the Red Cross drives. Unbelievable. And we're going to utilize them and work with them more with the CERT team and utilize the Red Cross skills and some of the trainings that they have in order to help the CERT team do some of the things. And the important thing to stick with Red Cross is this. They're the ones that certify a lot of the shelters that are around here. But at the same time, when FEMA comes in a major disaster, they work hand in hand with the Red Cross. We can't afford to lose them. And the volunteers that support them are really, really amazing. And something that is going to be recognized next month, but something that I think about every day. These are the teams. This is how big this emergency volunteer family is that supports the emergency management process and programs. And it's something that really takes those few professional public safety responders and gives them the support to do some of the things that they do, which is pretty incredible. One thing I wanted to highlight is grant funding. The grant funding that we talk about, some of these volunteer groups, also comes down my pathway. And in 2020, we were able to secure $34,500 for freeze-dried food for the cash sites. In 2021, we were able to get quite a bit more, $9,999 from that came from Homeland Security for the Oscar Pitt Station tank, which has not been started yet. $15,000 came from the Clatsop County to support the MRC radio development, and that was a multi-pronged approach: private funding, city funding, county funding, but very generous. They gave us the lion's share of it. And then we had a large fund that grant that came in that we had talked about last week. The good thing about those things is that kind of money that comes into this program really does start from you guys committing to having a full-time emergency manager here, you guys and the budget committee committing to funding some of these projects that allows us to go out and get some of these things. Big challenge is how do we deploy them and how do we maximize our efforts to get these things done? And we're working on that. But realistically, it's an awesome gift to have us to be able to work these angles and to get these things moving forward, because it would take a long time for a community to recover those kind of funds to develop. It would take a long time to do that responsibly. So we're very proud of the grants that are coming in from the private sector and from the public. Recovery, I'm sorry this is taking a while, but it's a big subject that we're talking about. Recovery is something that fortunately FEMA has a plan for. The state's getting better in the recovery efforts, and our county's getting improved on how they basically assist us with recovery efforts. Our attorneys for the city have also drafted several contracts to allow us to get support from companies and get those done and signed ahead of time, so that we have recovery efforts coming without having to plan it after, during an incident. And that's something that we're working on. And that we have to improve this year. And our city attorneys, I got to admit, I'm kind of on the bottom of the shelf, the amount of projects that they're handling right now. And eventually they'll come up, but we're on the right track. We are definitely on the right track. So any questions for me? Well, that's a long time for me talking, but.
Pretty impressive.
There's some amazing stuff happening. And one of the last things that Rick talked about was the companies we're trying to get under contract. That's because if an event occurs and we try to hire McEwen, then there's a good chance that, we just say, hey, Mike, come on over and start working for us. There's a good chance we won't get reimbursed for whatever we have to pay him. But if we go through a normal contracting process during the disaster, we can get paid, or we can have advance, or what we call in place contracts. So we're trying to hire several companies and we'll give them contracts. We don't pay them anything. But if we have contracts that are acceptable to FEMA will reimburse us for those, any work they do. And so that's all related to utilities and that sort of work. And I keep telling Rick, he's doing an amazing job. And where he is now, I thought we would have been in about 4 years. It's just the energy and, all the people around him with the volunteers and everything else. It's like they have a leader now. And so it's going great.
Thank you, Rick.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Job.
No questions?
I covered, when I first came here, I started covering emergency management from 2007. And I think Sam will probably agree, we're in so much better position than we were in those days. So I really appreciate what you've done and your volunteers.
We're heading the right direction.
Yeah. Something else.
Take some more time.
There's something else I want to add that with the emergency management, who is it, state emergency, mass care?
Human services.
Yeah, human services. In their minds, theirs came to a brilliant conclusion. And that's, who cares if we have a bunch of tents and all that kind of stuff in Salem? They need to be, how do we get them out there? Or do we get them out there before? Well, us improving our cash sites to the degree that we are makes it's like, okay, you're probably going to be one of the first to get all this stuff because you need it and you can take care of it. So there's a lot of synergy with these kind of relationships and, the projects that we're doing, all that. It's something about which we can be proud and can be proud of Rick, regardless of what his father says when he comes to meetings.
True story.
Yeah.
I have a little anecdote and I want to this just reminded me of it. The other day, 2 days ago, they had, what was it called? Able
readiness.
A big, hoo-ha. They set up a whole setup of command center, mass units and housing with the tents and all that kind of stuff somewhere near Salem. And it was all videoed. And I was watching it live and I just happened to catch the guy who was here, one of the guys that was here. I think they were all there, but I had talked to him and he was the financial guy. He was kind of an interesting person that was very focused on how you pay for what they were doing. And I just happened to mention the fact that, you could go to the surplus supply place down near Salem, between Salem and Kaiser, the state surplus. And his eyes got really big and then the conversation drifted off and it was something else. Well, during that performance, he was doing his presentation in the command center and he said, we have just recently started working with the Oregon State surplus for getting some of the materials. I'm going, okay, he listened. That was cool.
Good job.
But anyhow. Thanks, Rick.
Yep.
Thank you going here.
Thanks, Rick.
Next week, we'll just talk about the volunteers because they deserve a whole day. So on the 8th, we're going to be doing a dinner for everybody and we'd like you guys to attend.
Thanks.
Thank you.
TSP update, Jeff.
So first off, I like to not have to follow Rick. It's just not fair. It's like bad cop, a good cop followed by bad cop. Like, here comes the planner. Uh-oh.
That's exactly what Rick said.
Uh-huh. All right.
Rick actually said, have Jeff follow me.
Exactly.
I don't know what he was.
And now he's got those snazzy PowerPoints too, now I got to live up to that.
He used to have the market on that.
Okay. Market is no longer cornered. Okay. So TSP update, fairly brief on that, so we can get into the affordable housing, workforce housing. But I did want to say thank you for those that joined us on February 3rd for either the PET Project Advisory Committee meeting in the morning or the open house in the evening. If you haven't seen it, they're up on our website and you can watch those like any of our meetings. But I thought they were great discussions, good questions out of them and people making some good comments that we took note of and will help inform the project. People can still and always respond through the website or to me personally or to planning. and reach out and comment on. I push everyone towards the technical memo number 6, which has been posted. It's in a draft form, and that's the preferred alternatives that are out there. And that's what those meetings were about. We will be coming online with an open house, one of those interactive open houses for those preferred alternatives. That will be in March. And so it'll be another opportunity for more feedback to be gathered on that. Then we move into the draft phase of the project, or draft transportation system plan. We'll start going public. We'll project it for April, and then make a joint session with you and the planning commission on that. And so CannonBeachTSP.com. If you haven't been there, get there, look through the project library, get involved, because as you saw with the SDCs, some of what we've worked with Rick and emergency management, all of that, what I like to call pre-response responders. When, you know, there's the first responders. Well, pre-response, you don't even have to have first responders because you've done enough pre-planning that you don't have to have emergency response. That is the goal of including emergency management in long-range planning, because they're intimately connected, as Rick goes to show. Any questions on the TSP? All right, let's go. Let's get into the housing. And there you go. All right, thank you. And so housing matters, and how I wanted to start this conversation is I didn't want to. I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to bring in Katie to have her story of searching for housing when she came to work for us, and getting notice in the past month that she has to be out of her house in so many days, and now facing it again. I wanted to bring in Robert, who's my new planner, and how he had to get a trailer and move to a trailer in just outside of Gearhart and live in a temporary trailer until he could find some kind of housing. I wanted to tell stories and have them come in and give their testimonials, which I still think is a great idea for us. If everyone gave their testimonials, it would put a face to what we struggle with as a workforce in this community. When I said we've got to do something, there's not an issue of this that doesn't come out where it's not above the fold. It's housing. It's housing. It's housing in every community. We've got to do something. And so I called the regional planners all across Clatsop County to come together. Let's do something. We've got to solve this regionally. This has got to be done. And so we gathered and got a response immediately as after I sent out the notification to gather. And it's from Scott, who's leaving Warrenton as the city planner. He's had been there less than a year because he couldn't solve the housing issue. Alton, okay, he's worked in Astoria. He's about to work in Gearhart. Why? Because no one can hire a building official. They can't find housing. These are building officials. They can't find housing. It's ridiculous. Okay, so I wanted to start with stories because that's what we deal with every day. I deal with it every day. The planner first planner we offered the job to, she couldn't take the job from Portland, is where she lives, because she couldn't find housing. So it affects everything we do. And so agenda tonight, I'm going to talk about terms, then we're going to talk about where we stand as a community, doing the math, housing strategy status update, tools that are out there, and what we've learned so far, and taking those next steps. So first off, I want to, as always, start with our comprehensive plan, because as you know, that's kind of the guiding force for any planning. I want to concentrate on the housing policies. In order to maintain the city's character and its diverse population, the city will encourage, one of my favorite planner ease terms, encourage the development of housing, which meets the needs of a variety of age and income groups, as well as groups with special needs. Number 3, to the extent possible, the city shall endeavor to accommodate affordable housing in a manner that disperses it throughout the city, rather than concentrating in specific locations. 6, city recognizes the importance of its existing residential neighborhoods in defining the character of community and will strive to accommodate new residential development in a manner that is sensitive to scale, character, and density of the existing residential development patterns. 10, the city will encourage the preservation of older housing stock. The city, in conjunction with Cannon Beach Historical Society, should establish a voluntary program for protecting buildings with local historic merit. Few things in there. You see encourage a lot, okay? Comprehensive plans like to encourage a lot of things, but do they get them done? Okay? And what's the other? A lot of those will conflict with each other. I mean, if you're talking about keeping the existing and yet accommodating the new, that's conflicting language. That's danger. That's starting to weigh things against each other. In the economy policies, that's what it says in the comprehensive plan. I would put 6 there. It's economic policies. 2, the 3 major sectors of the city's economy are tourism, the second home industry, and retirement. The city anticipates that these sectors will continue to constitute the majority of the city's economy. The city's efforts will be directed toward enhancing these economic sectors in a manner that results in the desired balance between the residential and resort elements of the community. Policy 10, city will consider actions which will support the needs of the retirement community. I don't know of any other comprehensive plans I've worked with that talk about supporting the needs of the retirement community and the retirement as an industry, as a economic industry. The city will consider actions that will diversify the local economy where those businesses are compatible with the city's small town character. So in the earlier slide, we talked about diversifying and respecting the age and special needs and affordable housing. And yet, is that mentioned in the economy and the policies? Because that's part of the people. So when we talk about terms, you know, it's difficult because I've worked in this area for 20 years in affordable workforce housing, sustainable resiliency. My first job, just a little bit about Jeff, is that Jeff came out and his first job was within affordable housing and military housing for the Army Corps of Engineers. So that's what I worked on. And I worked on sustainable initiatives. And this was back in the 90s, okay? So I've been working in this area for decades. Affordable housing. People say, well, we can't have affordable housing. Well, this is Cannon Beach. You can't do affordable housing in Cannon Beach. Look at the price of it. Let's get the terms correct. So affordable housing is from the federal government. It's tied to federal funding, and it's a percentage. It's a percentage of American median income level. And it talks about providing home at 30% of that cost. It's a federal kind of term. Workforce housing, a community and a local derived term. It's saying we want to make room for a workforce in our community. Those people, those fire and police and public service, public workers, we need them in our community. If the water line breaks, if somebody gets hurt, we need them in the community as part of this community and not just in emergencies. They're a vital voice in the communities. Age matters and those kind of things. Being part of that. We're starting to hear about, you know, families and concerns about families. Well, that's part of it, the working families of the communities. And so you can get into the math and the 60% and all that, but you can easily find that stuff out. Just your county, Clatsop County, Oregon, AMI, whatever, it will give you the yearly average by HUD to declare, and that's what we would hold to. So 2014 housing report, employers' view on housing. The majority of local employers near 80%, said that finding housing is a problem for their employees. And then I can go into this more. The studies are there, 2014. 2016, housing, vision statement, to forge a housing plan that encourages and facilitates the creation of long-term workforce rental housing in Cannon Beach, identifying long-term and short-term strategies and solutions that are inclusive of all in the workforce. Okay. And you can go into there and see all these different strategies, these goals, and it still hits home today. I mean, read that definition, the problem definition. People who work at Cannon Beach cannot afford to live in Cannon Beach. This has become a strain not only on local employers, but on the community itself, which needs an array of residents, families to maintain its social balance and economic well-being. It's true. It's more true today than when they wrote the report 5 years ago, 6 years ago. 2019, Clatsop County Housing Strategy Study. First meeting I attended when I arrived here back in 2018 was the first public reveal. That's the first time I met Brandon. He was at the meeting in Seaside, and I didn't even know he was on the council. I didn't know I was going to be working for him. So, but he was at the meeting. And, you know, just to go over a few of those points, okay? One, ensure land zoned for higher densities uses is not developed at lower densities. I'm not going to ask us, are we doing these things? Okay, I'm just going to, you will think that to yourself as we're doing it. Further study the potential need for a UGB amendment in Seaside to help meet South County housing needs. Now you might say, what do we need to do about Seaside? Well, a good percentage of your workforce, as we're going to see, work in Seaside. Refine DLI data and results. Further assess, and that's buildable lands inventory, which we'll get to in a sec. Further assess and address infrastructure issues. And then next page, this is for other recommendations. And if you look at from the development code, I'll just pick out a couple there. Establish minimum density standards. Revise maximum density, height or bulk standards in higher density residential zones. Support high density housing and commercial. Any of those, are we doing those? Yes, we are. We're promoting accessory dwelling units, or at least we allow accessory dwelling units. And I think we do a nice job of not allowing those to become short-term rentals. And so we are doing some things, but are we attacking these and taking track of these and making them our strategy for housing? Streamline permitting reviews, system development charges, we just heard. Tax exempt abatements. Others, these are the tools, okay, for and uses. Tax instrument financing, construction excise tax. That's our big ticket right there, and we'll get into that in just a second. Public-private partnerships, bonds, other coordination. But one thing, a word that keeps coming up, whoops, if you keep looking at this, what is it? Regional housing coordination, regional consistency, regional, okay? And we're going to keep coming to this because it's the only strategy. Where do we stand? 8 units. We've constructed 8 units. In 2018, when I first got here, they were just getting built. Deed restricted to prevent converting to multifamily dwelling, condominium use, or similar individual, but only for 10 years. We only have a 10-year agreement on those, okay? Rent controlled, and that's based on those numbers that I showed you at the first, HUD controlled, rent controlled numbers that we update every April. Incentives for development, we gave them about $20,000 on their waivers for building. So that's coming from that 255,000 or so, you know, around 250,000 that we've collected from the CET, from the construction excise tax, about 50,000 annually since I've been here. And what did these numbers mean? Nancy brought up earlier from the buildable land study about how much we have Well, if you would go back, one of the recommendations here, if I pointed out earlier, was to look further at the buildable land study. That's one of the recommendations, because they even admit in this that, you know, it needs to be revised if you're going to start looking at your UGBs and your planning. Because if you look at the footprint, like I said earlier, a lot of this is not really buildable lands in Cannon Beach, and considering slopes, wetlands, floodplain, all those things. And so, you know, that's one of the first steps we would want to do, start getting a real handle on where we're going. But what I want to bring out in the numbers is that all I hear is that it's a growing short-term rentals. That's why we're having housing problems. The short-term rentals have stayed at 200 since 2015, since we've been tracking this, okay? Right around 200. It has not increased. In fact, I get a call, at least one a day, probably, you know, more than that. What is short-term rentals in Cannon Beach? Well, let me tell you, you can only do 14-day. What does that mean? That means you can only have 2 parties approximately a month. Click. It ends those people that just call in. It's a great program. And it, you know, others look to us as a possible forward on theirs. And, you know, they're doing moratoriums and all this and other areas. We just don't see that. We're not seeing the growth that would demand that. Where we are seeing, and the latest numbers, you guys have seen this before, this is that housing breakdown compared to Manzanita, Seaside, and Gearhart, updated a little bit now with the newer numbers. And we did this by beds. We were looking at hotels. We tried to do this kind of looking at by bedrooms, okay? So with estimates on all of that. And you can see the number from 2010 to 2019. What's growing? It's that seasonal occupancy. It's the second home. Second homes are what's growing in Cannon Beach. It is not short-term rentals. It is not all the other, and we definitely know, look at that blue at the bottom. It's not owner occupied. The percentage is not going up in owner occupied. We're losing that, just like we're losing population. And so what about our workforce, okay? That's what this is about. This is, you know, that's what I wanted to bring the matter before you. We're having, as a county, having difficulty hiring talent. I mean, you look at Rick, you look at Rusty and Jen, you look at these people, they are team players. They are amazing. They step up every day, just like Rick says, you know, the volunteers, but we have great staff, great team. I mean, if I need anything, Rusty does it. I mean, it doesn't say, okay, I'll get to it tomorrow. I've worked in places where if I call IT, oh, they may come, I might see them next week. But Rusty, I mean, he drops what he's doing and comes and helps. I mean, it's incredible, the level of support, and to attract that talent and keep that talent is going to be crucial moving forward. This is from anybody ever going to On the Map. It's a census product. It's a little tool. You can look at commuting patterns going back for 10, 20 years. And it is a great tool to see where your workforce comes from, where they're going to. And so this is all on the census data. 2019 is the latest set they have released. And that's where our workforce from Cannon Beach comes from. That's the Portland area right there, over there on the, and that's up towards Cannon Beach. Okay, so this is it. This is this is our workforce. 3 numbers I want you guys to remember was 8. That's the number of units that has been built since 2018 or since we started the program. Okay. The other number I want you to remember, 75. 75 people live and work in Cannon Beach. That's it. 75 from the census. Okay. The rest are either coming in or employed elsewhere and coming into Cannon Beach. And the other number live in Cannon Beach and are working elsewhere. And that's what that's showing you right there. Okay, and that's comparing us across the region. I wanted to do this for our regional gathering, showing us where our workforce is, where they're coming from. We have, of course, what we would think, us and Gearhart have the least amount living and working in their community. Astoria and Seaside are our work centers, and you can see that they also, where do they come from? These are the top 10 places that each community draws their workers from. And you can see Cannon Beach down there, Seaside, and pretty much elsewhere is where we're all over. They're coming from. And so I've also given you the industries. And you can look at Cannon Beach. It's not a balanced economy. I mean, our comprehensive plan said retirement, tourism, and second homes. Well, yeah, we have a lot of construction, but there's not a lot live here in the construction area. That's that green area at the bottom as a percentage of our workforce. Our workforce is basically in accommodations and food service and in retail. And then the balance, you can compare that across the various jurisdictions just to see how dependent we are on tourism. So I wanted to look at our workforce, okay? And so this is looking at just the city of Cannon Beach's workers, okay? Those employed by us, the city, and the year they were hired along the bottom, a scatter plot of when they were hired and their one-way commuting distance from where they're hired. And as you can see, those more recently hired, there's a growing trend to be further away. Okay, so this is the entire Cannon Beach workforce. This is the staff level. And this is the management level. And that's even with management, our most recent one, that dot up at the far right corner, that's with that employee living currently outside of Cannon Beach, but will soon be living in Cannon Beach once their residence is complete. So that curve will even get closer towards that. So, you know, I don't want this to be a class divide, as just like about everything else in this world we're coming to, but that's what we're becoming. And it gets back to that, having the workforce in your community. As our primary workers in public works, many that live here in this community, they're going to be aging out soon. We're not going to be able to replace them with workers that live here. And what that does is when your water line breaks or whatever happens into public works, which Karen can speak to almost daily, it's going to be a challenge. And that's what happened in the communities I worked in, Park Cities, the Sun Valleys, the Aspens. That's what forced them into what their approach is that we have got to assure a place for our workers in our community, because we have got to be able to respond. So it always gets back to Rick and Jason and the responders, you know, response is the key, but anyhow, so doing the math, that's me, you know, I'm a data guy. Mike's better at it than I am, but I'm a data guy. Anyhow, actual median income, that thing I keep talking about with the affordable housing, says, this is from the latest one, 72,900 household. That's our actual median income for Clatsop County, 72,900. Okay, and so that's the kind of the math breakdown for yearly and how much income. And there's the calculator on the right. That's how much house you should be able to buy with that median income. Now, sure, you could double that. Let's just say, hey, maybe this is, you know, that is household, but sure. What if you had two working, yeah, but that's still the household calculation. It's not individual, it's household. So, I mean, sure, there's an upper range, but it's not going to grow much more than 288,000, okay? Look at that average house sale from Zillow 2021 for Cannon Beach, $862,000 average sale price in Cannon Beach. So do the math. We did a search on Zillow, and this was just this week. How many? Yep, 6 are for sale for under that amount. And 1 in the entire Clatsop County. You can see the red dots. That's where you'd have to travel to at that AMI of 60%. Okay, that's what you could afford, and that's where you'd have to travel from work with. I think somebody did it today or whatever, and they found up to 4 for rent, but that's not using that exact calculation. So, I mean, it is unbelievably hard to find housing. When Katie and Robert were trying to find rental housing, it just wasn't to be had. And I could get more into the depths of this, but it is late and I don't want to get into that right now. I want to keep us on focus on these stories, okay? So what's that? That's where I work, okay? This is where I began my career. I began my career in a new Leeds Platinum building built in the last 2 or 3 years before I started in Blaine County, Idaho. 10, 15 minutes from Sun Valley, just up the valley. That's the county, that's what they built for their employees. Over on the left, that's what I'm working in. And
More specifically, he's working in this.
that modular, that trailer is stuck in there, right?
Sitting on prime real estate.
Right, and everybody wants it. That's what's scary, okay? But that office up there, you can see the first window to the right of the entry was actually my office. And what a beautiful office. Anyhow, that's where I lived in Blaine County, Idaho, Haley, Idaho, about a 10-minute walk from where you just saw that picture. This is where I lived in a workforce housing deed restricted unit. Okay. I bought my first home. Okay. Right there. And this was how many years ago? 20 years ago? Okay. That's where I live now in beautiful Cannon Beach. It's a rental home. I could be, just like my administrative assistant, given notice at any moment. And would I be able to find a replacement here in this? I doubt very seriously. And so I would be thrown back to the commuting world. And I think a community loses a lot when you lose the workforce, and we're losing the workforce. So what have other communities done? Well, Aspen, they have the workforce housing model. I'm not going to go into every detail of these. I would encourage everyone to go to the websites. Crested Butte, I forward that story to you guys about how to save a ski town. There's another great example of a town that's working on these issues. Park City, working on this issue. Telluride, working on these issues. One of the things I wanted to show you was go through the little calculator for doing a new home in Telluride. What if it's a 2,000 square foot home? You'd be paying about $40,000 towards employee housing offset. That's how you have to do it in Colorado. You're paying per home you build, like that SDC charge. And we're talking about whatever percentage, Mike, on, yeah, these people are going to pay it. I was out in the backyard with somebody today looking at what they're wanting to do. And that's what he said, they're here once or twice a year. They don't care. They want to do it. And, and so what are these communities doing? Aspen, total unit inventory, 3,000 units over. Ownership, rental. Demand-based project planning that uses collaborative public involvement, identify community needs, and develop properties. You can go to the website and see yearly how many turn over. Okay. Crested Butte, 305 deed restricted units, 25. We're talking secondary markets. That's how you solve it, because the market is broken. Every community in this country knows the market is not working. It is broken. How do you fix it? You got to find a secondary market. You have got to provide alternative, because it's never going to, you can say forever, we can meet again and again, we can do report again and again, we can get consultants to do another study, but they're going to come back with the same thing. You can't afford affordable housing, and you can throw up your hands and say, we can't afford affordable housing, but you can do something about it. 550 workforce housing units in Park City. and various projects, various types, they're doing it for different types, ages, all those things that we say we're doing in our comprehensive plan, they're doing. So what have we learned? It takes many tools. It takes a regional approach. It takes partnerships. It takes time and resources. It takes staff. It takes dedicated workforce. We described above. It takes acknowledgement that another task force committee consultant report just doesn't cut it. It takes a secondary market, a vision, leadership, specific and measurable goals, focused and implementable strategies which result in built units. And it does, it works. And it may not be the greatest, it may not solve every need, but it does help the workforce find housing and supply housing. And so, like I said, I called the regional planners together and we met last week. And there are immediate steps we can take. And so accessory dwelling units as workforce housing units. We could quickly, you could guys say, Jeff, go do it right now. Draft up that legislation that allows building permits, like Karen, the SDCs, other fees to be covered by that CET, okay, to a dedicated workforce housing program, okay? Stipend, financing to meet gaps between AMI and market-based. Exception or bonus to owners for allowable FARs. We're getting ready to talk about square footages and allowable, well, you could give bonuses for people and use it like PDRs and things like they do and Ketchum and Aspen and things like that. There's regional solutions. We could convene regional elected officials to discuss the needs, goals, strategies, and next steps. After having that regional planners meeting, I had Seaside and the county both commit that their elected officials would meet tomorrow. They are ready to go on this and they want to discuss. Those are the first two I would approach. Let alone the housing authority. We need to bring them into this discussion. So the day after I have the meeting with the regional planners, I get a call from Astoria, okay? And here's a project in Astoria. You guys know this building? I think it's right fairly close to Fort George because I'm pretty sure I've looked off of the deck after a beer and looked at that building. And what are they wanting to do? They're wanting to do kind of a mirror reflection, adding about 50 affordable housing units. They said, hey, I heard you guys have the construction excise tax and you might be willing to help gap finance some of this. I said, I can't promise that. I can't do that, but I can tell you, I can, if you allow me, I'll take this before them and show them there are projects ready. And we saw from the earlier slide that our workforce is coming from here. And sure, this is for senior housing. It may not fit what we want to do, but this is the kind of things that are out there and that could be a regional approach that we saw. Because I think we all know we're not going to build all of our workforce housing. Heck, we only have 75 that live and work here now in the workforce. But we can build some, and we may build them in Cannon Beach, but we may find that like that Seaside area or by the junction that's much talked about, or maybe it's Warrington, or maybe it's Astoria, but we need to help out and solve this regionally. And so in the future, we know that we got the complete code audit coming. This should help. This is like a perfect time to be doing this. So identify the policies, programs, and projects to address housing needs. We need to identify partners like Clatsop County, the Housing Authority, others. That's one of the things that you'll see in most of these successful communities that out west. They've got nonprofits working on it. They got foundations working on it. They've got all different partners working on this. And identify strategic growth strategies. Where do we want to grow? And where do we want to go together? How do we want to grow together? And how do we develop transportation, infrastructure, and amenities to meet those regional needs? So I'm throwing this back, and here are my ideas, okay? Just from this is the three things that I would hope that we could do. One, Jeff, go get that workforce ADU language done and take it to the planning commission. Okay, that's my first idea. Second, regional solutions. Jeff, I would like you guys to point a liaison on housing. And I've got a hint that Brandon, I mean, I don't know if he's committed to keep it going, but I worked with him. I know he, as like last year we had the coffee, you were still committed to it. I would love to see him sit down with Seaside, the county, the housing authority, start those steps forward. And then if it's a regional group to get together, that's how we get that ball rolling. 3, continue this discussion that we're having and let me come back in April with a game plan. Okay, so that's kind of a 3-pronged attack. I like 3-pronged attacks. And, you know, I got that from Rick. But that's my housing matters discussion. I thank you guys for listening to me this late and for, as you know, I'm passionate about this stuff because, you know, this is why I got into planning. It wasn't to sit there and listen to somebody's neighbor complain about the fence line on this. It's to do these things because we can do something about this, and to just keep talking about it and pushing the ball to the next. It's not going to solve the problem, and we can solve it.
Jeff, with the ADU, can you make that a deed restriction?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, we would.
Because we didn't with the.
Yes. I would say, I'll come back as part of that. I'll show you the different avenues you can go with that. But that is definitely what we want to do. We want to say, you're going to sign up for this program, right? It's going to be out for a certain long time. This is how it works.
And you're going to live with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that ADUs,
Yeah.
we know that we won't allow them for short-term rental. But I want to make sure that the houses that they're connected to are also not used for short-term rental.
Bingo.
Okay, so once again, we got to keep focused though, right? Short-term rentals keeps getting dragged into this. It's not been shown to be the problem. It's second homes is the problem, right?
Well, and I have to bring up that I think you may have licensed short-term rentals. There are other people out there that are renting short-term that we don't have a grasp on.
Very good point, but we've got a new code enforcement official that's coming on soon. And so that's that should be their number one priority, right? We hear that, we haven't seen proof. So let's see the proof.
So how do we solve the problem of the second homes, the seasonal housing that you're saying is growing so much?
I think that's for another night's discussion. I think that is a big topic. These mountain town communities face this as well. And yet I think you can't solve that. I think you have to start saying it's just like a land trust. That's what a land trust does, right? It says, hey, we know there's whether it's biodiversity, whatever that land trust mission is, it says we're not going to be able to solve it for everything, but we can reserve this area and preserve that area. And that keeps it just like secondary markets. It keeps that and preserves that area for a portion of your workforce, right? So the others are maybe turning into second home, but this is not going to turn into second homes. Go look at any of these websites and you're going to see that churn and that demand for that housing continues. So that's the successful way. Now, there's other ways of kind of going at that other portion, but that's a big topic.
Oh, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
That was just, plus all the other stuff from the history. That was a lot of good reading and brought me some ideas.
Good job.
No one forgets about Rick.
Thanks, Jeff. Good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Good job is we have to remember it when we talk about it.
Don't give up on us. But
you won't.
Take a 5-minute stand-up break.
5-minute break. Thank you. We're about halfway. We're going to jump to the farmers market business license fees. Bruce.
Yes, for the past 2 years, we have reduced the license fees from 75, I think it was, down to $10. And we are recommending, because of the unsure nature of what's going to be happening in the future, that we do it again, because we want to try to retain our people for another year till we get back into more of a normal situation. So we would do this by ordinance. We have done it, you've done it twice. We're asking you to do it again.
Third time's charm.
Okay? All right. And I just want to make one point, because I was having a conversation with Philomena. Down at the bottom, kind of in the blue font, the question that Ashley sent, or somebody sent to Ashley: prepared foods sold at the farmer's market booth subject to the tax. And I want to say generally, yes, unless it's the booth operator's nonprofit or service. So the trailers, or what do they call them, the food trucks that we've had will be charged, we'll have to pay that fee. It's the only place that they might work, that they might have to do that additional paperwork and tracking. So we don't know what the impact is going to be, but it is possible that people will say, well, that's just too much trouble. And so we may have food trucks, we may not. I just wanted to alert you all at this point that that is a potential impact of this. And it was brought out to you by Ashley, but as we're getting ready to gear up, I was thinking, well, what happens with that?
What about vendors that sell things like jams that, they're already prepared, they're already in a bottle ready, or jar ready to sell? And we do have some of those at farmers market, jams and other prepared foods, the honey and so forth. Is that all subject to tax? Food tax?
I will check, but I don't believe so. It is, if they poured some honey on a biscuit, that would be a prepared food. Something that's already closed, and that is not, I do not believe it to be.
Ashley likes to talk about immediate consumption as well, because it's a jar, you're gonna take it home and eat it.
Yeah. Okay.
The other one is baked goods.
I'm sorry?
Baked goods.
Those are excluded. There's an actual, in the language, I believe that's one of the exclusions, baked goods, loaves of bread. I have to pull it up to see the exact language.
If they cut it up and put butter on it.
Yeah.
So if I eat it, for instance, if I buy something and I go to the information booth and I eat it, they would actually should be charging me tax.
No, because you're not the vendor.
No.
We're gonna come after you.
Yeah, they can come after me.
And that's a brilliant segue for the next item. So I believe I have our direction that will bring you the ordinance. We'll reduce it to 10 years again, $10 a year for the business license. And everybody's on notice with the issue with potential food truck loss. So Mayor, we can go on.
I think about half of the time the past summer, we were without a food truck,
Yeah.
even without the prepared food
Yeah.
tax. So
There's less garbage they have to pick up and clean up.
And the other thing is, I think that people, if they don't go to the food truck, they might go to another business in Cannon Beach to eat. So I don't think there's a real big downside other than if people just expect to be able to eat at an event like this.
I would think eventually the food truck providers would figure it out, because they're gonna want to be doing other venues than just that. If we have, the event venues.
Right, yeah.
So they're gonna figure it out eventually, but
Yeah. No, I think so, but
yeah,
they don't have to do it at all now, so it may be a burden.
yeah.
You want me to read you that language that talks about bread, just so you guys know?
Sure, go ahead.
So this is talking about taxes being imposed. So these are people who would be taxed, and it says all orders of bakery products, including takeout or to go, prepared on the premises except for whole cakes, whole pies, or loaves of bread, either one sliced, and any order consisting of 6 or more bakery products.
That means you have to buy 6 cookies.
Oh, darn.
Yeah, darn.
Okay, next item.
Next item was, we've been talking about potential for a committee for the Cannon Beach Elementary Rejuvenation Project. Sam, you were kind of leading this discussion and you sent 3 questions, which I forwarded in the staff report for generate discussion.
First and I were gonna work on, last I remember, we were gonna work on the letter that was gonna be sent out and realized that I realized we really didn't know what we were asking. So I had to come back to the council to ask one of 3 things that were being asked in the letter. And it was very confusing. So if we could hammer out a little more closely what it is we want, and that's why I asked these 3 questions, which one of these would work best for us? Or if you can think of something else, throw that out. The first one, I will try and explain. Are we inviting a group of interested folks to help with the design process in an advisory to council? Probably not really to the architect, but because we are hiring the architect, it would be. Or are we creating a group of citizens which will help the council design a management system for the operation of the facility? So essentially, they'd be just a one task group to help us figure this out. Or are we actually creating the management group initially so that they become the ones who create the system? Bring it to us, we will work it out as a board to board kind of situation. I'll just throw that out there and I won't throw my preferences in until we talk about it some more.
My preference would be for at least number 2. The being advised on the architect, I think the public meetings that we will hold be sufficient for that. And then as to number 3, I'd like to be advised on that rather than try to create that right now before the project's finished.
Yeah, I think that's later down the road, number 3. Yeah, I think you're right, Brandon. I tend to agree with you.
I agree with Brendan's comments.
Okay.
And
Robin,
to try and jog my memory as to when we, initially discussed that, my feeling is that that's what the council intended.
Okay.
That's just my memory.
Okay, well, we can work with that.
I thought that's what we were doing.
Okay.
On previous meetings, but I always open to look at other options, but what Brandon just and Robin expressed, to me, it makes sense. And I kind of thought that's where we were headed.
Okay.
Yeah, with all the different entities, they'll help us not forget each piece that we need to have in there.
Fine. No, I'm not disagreeing. I needed to know so we can do this invitation to create this group. So I think we have guidance. To go with the number 2 idea of creating a short single task committee, I'll just call it a committee, single task to help us design the management system for the operations of the facility. That will then be coincidental to the designing of the building itself. And so these folks will be able to give us some input back and forth as to what the building will need, because the architect's going to ask us those questions. Okay, let's do that.
Okay, so what'll happen is that they will work alongside the design And then maybe at the 50%, 75%, they'll say, it looks like this is how we should manage the facility. It's not something that they need to decide on day one. They learn as they go. Okay, all right. And then we had a list, and I don't have it in front of me now, and I think there were some groups missing, like the food bank. And I don't know who else.
Food
but-
Bank, HRAP, and the Historic History Center.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, those were the new ones.
Right on.
Amazing, I can remember anything. 4 hours.
That's why Bruce and I sit next to Nancy.
Yeah, we copy.
Okay, we can move on to the next topic then.
No, I only got 2. History Center, HVAC, food bank.
Boy. It isn't it?
No,
Yeah, okay.
it's normal.
That's scary.
Yeah, okay, good. All right, yes, next item would be fine.
Food tax materials.
I'm going to turn this over to Jennifer, who did what I thought was a great job pulling everything together.
So earlier this week, we emailed out the draft guidance documents for you guys to review. We did get some feedback on some of the forms, and Lori's working on making some revisions on those. Was there any other feedback on the document, or did you feel that we were missing something?
I was a little confused about one of the forms, and you probably have already discussed this was that was the exempted and excluded sales. What is
Yeah, I spent some time with Lori on that, marked up and.
okay, because I don't know
anxious to
what
see
it
she
is.
comes back with.
It sounds like it's food that were not taxed, was not taxed.
And we're switching the language to all be exempt.
Yeah.
But what does it mean?
Bread. We just found out a bread.
Okay, you saying that the retailers are the retailers are going, I mean, the restaurants and so forth, they're going to have to write down all the food that they didn't tax?
Right, but it's in a summarized way. So if whichever category they're exempting it in, they let us know and the dollar amount.
But they have to do that for every month?
Every quarter.
Well, I know, but it says reporting month, July, reporting month. But I mean, they're gonna have to keep track of it every day so that they can report on it every quarter,
If they
right?
have something that they're selling that's exempt, then they need to program their system to record that
Yeah, that's all.
so that they can report it to us. We do the same thing with short-term rentals and hotels.
It's like,
They have an exempt sale, then they tell us what it is.
So beverages are exempt. And so anytime they ring up beverages, that would report that beverages are exempt, for that portion of that ticket.
Yeah,
And I don't know what other things there might be, but that's also part of why we're bringing on Holland Herbert, so that she can work with the businesses to go ahead and set up those decision trees within the computer to allow them to be able to pull those things together. I remember that I was on a phone call, and one of the hotel operators, people were saying how long this was going to take. She said, I do this in a half hour, once a quarter. The software just does it all, and then I send it in. So it is possible, if you have a right system, that it should track all this stuff.
My understanding was with the chart that you were looking at was that you would list the category on your program on your computer. So beverages is one category, the way you ring it up. I can't think of another one, but if you had packaged brownies, they would be packaged. So you'd list that as a packaged item. You're not listing every single item by item.
it seems like it's necessary in order to do the audit.
Yes,
That's
exactly why.
doing it.
The idea
it seems
is that,
complicated. I mean, I just kind of, I guess I'm a little concerned for the restaurants that have to, if somebody orders, coffee and tea and dinner and dessert and maybe 5 cookies or something, but so the tea and the coffee and the, I guess it would be 6 cookies. The 6 cookies then would be exempted and everything else would be taxed.
But they're ringing that up now. They're
Yeah,
ringing up, the coffee, they're ringing up.
Coding it.
Yeah, but no, but right now they're ringing those things up when they, do the ticket. But what would happen is that it would internally sort those things out. And then it would actually calculate the tax to be paid.
mhm.
Nobody has to sit down and do that. It's, those things are out, this is in, here's your tax.
But then it's got to be put into this form, right?
Right.
Oh, well,
So at the end of the quarter, you just, the
So does that?
transactions are all,
Every sale, like restaurant has, 1,000 customers.
it's all summarized.
It's all summarized.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not individual detail.
1,000.
No, no, no.
We need to audit the system to track those things for them.
Okay, but I understand that part. I'm just concerned about having to input 1,000 sales.
Onto our tax return?
On this exempted and included sales form.
Right. Yeah, that wouldn't happen.
They'll just push coffee and they don't have to do another thing. They don't have to say if it's exempt or not.
Yeah, but they have to turn in a form that shows what was exempted.
beverages.
Right, it'll tell you the total of what was exempted in the quarter. But they don't have to go ahead and turn in every ticket.
Well, there's so many lines on here, it looks like they might have to. I guess that's my question.
Well, they have
It's a little
different
confusing. I think
different
it's.
categories of exempted. Could be, one of them could be T-shirts,
Mhm.
hats and mugs and cookies. And so I think that was, maybe I'm wrong. That's the way I looked at it. There could be more than just one exempted category.
I just find it confusing. I hope it's not confusing to the person who's actually having to fill it out.
And we can clean up the form. Make sure that people know what each one of those lines is for.
You've got lots of lines here and it looks like the way it reads to me, and again, I'm not in that
Looks like
business,
you'd be
but
making a list.
the way it reads to me, it looks like you're gonna have to fill out every line. I think, oh my.
Are you looking at page 1, Nancy, of the tax return?
Well, I'm reading the form that says report for exempt and excluded sales. Returns shall show the exempt and excluded sales and the basis for exemptions and exclusions and a detailed explanation for each.
That's what it looks like.
Each category. Yeah,
Okay, it doesn't say for each category, it just says,
we can do that. You can make that better.
I'm envisioning some kind of a meeting, be it virtual or whatever, where anybody that's going to be subject to this can ask questions of, either Lori or Ashley or whoever. And we can record that and let people be able to click on it.
Also, if you're a restaurant, unless you're changing your menu every quarter, that page isn't really going to change.
Right.
There are categories that you're listing, so you can literally make a copy of it and you'd be done.
Change.
Not everybody's going to have a bunch of those categories,
Yeah.
exemptions. They're not going to have all qualifying for all those exemptions.
I understand what Nancy's saying. We've all been trained that, a little red box comes up and says required field. And if you've got a list of places, there's kind of a feeling that you need to fill all those in. So I think we need to be more clear on it. As you said, it's categories.
yeah, categories would be a good addition to say. And I just think that, I don't know, the form itself just makes me think, I gotta fill in every line,
And the explanation right under the title. I can see why you come to the conclusion Nancy did, because it says returns shall show the exempted and excluded, we're going to combine those, and the basis for exemption and exclusions, and a detailed explanation of each.
Yeah,
That sounds like a lot
a
of,
lot of work.
so,
Could we pre-fill out one so that way they can see what it's supposed to look like?
That'd be good.
Yeah, I think that would be good for a good example for
Yeah.
whoever's reading this, because to me, it's, when I first read it, I thought, oh my God. You know, so.
Yeah, we can do that.
I always worried about filling all the lines into. But otherwise, we're good to go.
Yes, please. As soon as we can get it out, the better.
Yep, and then we'll, I will be making one change to the letter, that actually maybe it's two changes. I'll put something in here that if they want to contact Holland directly, before they get a call from her or something, she's given us a number that she's giving out, as well as the email address. So, anybody who wants to start before they get the letter, I'm sorry, before she can contact them, they can move forward.
Good. Okay. Close the work session and we'll start our special meeting, which we have two items. First item is the Warren Way Hemlock Project Award. And Karen is present that. Both of them, actually.
Little over a year ago, council made it clear to staff that reconstructing the Warren Way Hemlock intersection should be a priority. So this work is necessary to improve the traffic flow and pedestrian safety. As a result of that direction, city staff pursued and secured $100,000 in grant funding through the Oregon Department of Transportation's Small City Allotment Program, which is an annual allocation of state funds for local transportation projects. The city is providing an additional $38,000 for the project out of the roads fund. Working in concert with ODOT and A&M Engineering, the city publicly bid the Warren Way Hemlock project, and bids were open January 25th of this year. The apparent low bidder was Big River Construction from Astoria, with a bid amount of $118,209. In accordance with the city ordinance, the city council must authorize contract awards for construction projects of this dollar amount. Adequate funds for this project are budgeted in the 2021-22 fiscal year, secured through the Small City Allotment and Public Works operating budget. It is expected that this project will be completed by March 28th of this year. Staff recommends council authorize staff to award the contract to Big River Construction.
Karen, were there other bids? How many?
I'm sorry?
How many other bids were there?
Two other bids. One was disqualified for an incomplete bid packet, and the other was McEwen Construction.
Okay, thank you.
Other concerns about this?
Are you fairly certain about the completion date?
We are. That was part of the bid when it was put out, that it needed to be done before the Easter break, just because of the location of this. The project is fairly simple. And so both the bid company or the construction company that would potentially award the bid had no issue with that. So it's not like we're ordering parts or materials so much. It's a lot of excavation and landscaping.
A week prior to March 28th is the Oregon spring break.
Understood. So that date allows them to finish any last minute invoicing they need to get in for the project to be completed or deemed complete.
Okay.
Could weather cause any issues?
I'm sorry.
Could weather cause any issues with that timing?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Oh, well, we cannot pave when it's raining. The plant typically opens mid-March. So outside of weather delaying the asphalt plant from opening, That would be the only perceived delay.
Guess we need a motion on this one.
I move to approve the contract award to Big River Construction for the Warren Way and Hemlock project.
Second?
Any other comments? Jennifer?
Council President Benedict,
Yes.
Council Risley,
Yes.
Councilor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Council McCarthy,
Yes.
Mayor Snedell.
Yes. Next items, the bridge,
Okay.
their fund.
So you're familiar with the background of the bridge, I'm sure. The city has feasibility studies on the First Street Bridge that show it is unlikely that the bridge could withstand a seismic event because it was constructed at a time when seismic standards were less stringent than what they are today. Back in 2015, the city pursued a $1.7 million grant funding opportunity through the Oregon Department of Transportation that would allow for retrofitting the First Street Bridge, bringing it to current seismic standards. The city was not awarded any funds through this grant opportunity. As a result, $150,000 was spent on minimal repair and stabilization of the bridge using funds in the 2016 and 2017 adopted budget. However, this work does not meet the current seismic standards. No additional work has been done since that time. FEMA recently issued an invitation for grant application submittals due in August of 2022, which would allow the city to submit its First Street Bridge retrofit project for consideration. In preparation for doing this, funding is needed to compile the required documents and complete the application process. Within the approved and adopted 2021-22 budget, the Bridge Reserve Fund has a balance of $8,592 under the unallocated project line item. Public Works would like to use these funds for the purpose of compiling the required documents and grant application for submittal. In order to meet the August 2022 submission deadline, work needs to begin as quickly as possible. Staff recommends that council authorize the use of these unallocated funds in the amount of $8,592 towards the preparation of the necessary documents and application for submission to FEMA for the First Street Bridge retrofit project.
When you talk about retrofitting, does that mean the bridge will look very similar to what it looks like now?
It's to stabilize the bridge to be able to withstand a seismic event is exactly.
But what will it look like?
I can't answer that.
Okay, so would it just be that it would be grounded better? I know when they retrofit a house.
It would be stabilizing the pylons that are underneath the bridge. And also be doing the surface work that's on the top of the bridge now that ODOT identified last year that needs to be done. So I don't see that the cosmetic appearance of the bridge would have to change. Now, if for some reason the assessment comes back, the engineering company comes back and says the evaluation is such that this retrofitting job is not worth the money based on the condition of the bridge, or for any reason they decide it's not worth pursuing and they recommend that we rebuild it, then that I would go back to council and say, that's the situation of the evaluation. And we would start looking at design options.
Also, won't we be getting, I mean, this is an evaluation, so we'll be getting a report before we get any point of physical action happening on the bridge.
Well, we have a tremendous amount of documentation that was compiled at the time that the former Dan Grassick had pursued this for the city. So I think that based on that current documentation and anything that has happened between that time and now, I can't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to retrofit it and not have to completely rebuild.
But if there is a change, it'll be brought to you.
Yes, I mean, and
Change everything without telling.
Annually, ODOT comes and does a bridge inspection. So if we had some significant damage to the bridge that put it at risk, it would be in that annual report that they do. And that's just not the case. The bridge surface needs to be addressed.
Do you know how long after you do the submittal that you will have the answer?
Well, I'd like to be able to answer that too. I can just tell you that I submitted a FEMA application for 4 generators, and I'm in the 15th month of waiting for an answer on that. We are still in the application process of trying to get that approved. So I have no idea.
Okay. Business Oregon is way behind also.
Can we also get a third lane for the Elk?
Yeah.
I saw him use the sidewalk the other day.
Very good. We need a motion on this, I believe. So
Move to approve the use of $8,570 or $92 in unallocated project funds under the Bridge Reserve Fund to pursue this FEMA grant opportunity.
Second?
Mayor, I just have a question. We don't know exactly what this is going to cost, but would you allow us to use some funds from contingency or something if the cost went to 10,000 rather than have to come back to you to get a new motion?
Since, at least speaking for myself, since we've given you that ability, I no problem.
You think, oh, yeah, okay, all right.
Up to 10.
Yeah, you already have that.
okay. Jennifer, when you're ready.
Counselor Risley.
Yes.
Counselor Ogletree.
Yes.
Counselor McCarthy.
Yes.
Council President Renfro.
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes. Okay, that
Thank
concludes our meetings.
Thank you, Karen.
For good of the order, I have one first.
Okay, go ahead, Sam.
I would very much like us to have a discussion about the beach cleanup, Sea Turtles Forever, and a work session before we get into the budget. Just so we have some discussion how we want to approach that.
March workshop, okay?
March is great. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. 2 things. Karen and I just found out that the main pump station for the city the generator has failed. And we are trying to, staff in Cannon Beach Electric, are trying to either convert another one to get to the voltage that we need for the main pump station. And also, the people from Caterpillar are going to be here tomorrow to take a look at it, to evaluate it. It is one of the generators that was going to be replaced under the FEMA grant. And we don't know how long that's going to take. But even if we were able to go ahead and repurpose one of the other generators, then we'd have another lift station without the generator if we ever have a power shortage or power drops. So in my mind, this is an emergency. And so the intent is to move forward, get the generator as quickly as we can. It may be months before we see one, but to move as quickly as we can on it. And then to work with FEMA to try to say that, all right, this is one of them that you said we were likely to get. If we have to go ahead and purchase it before, can we still get the grant? If we can't, I would still say we move forward and replace this generator. The cost will be, I'm hearing 45,000 to 55,000 because we don't know exactly where it's going to be. But there's funds, there's $210,000 in contingency available to fund that project. Just want to give you a heads up on that.
Is it mobile so that you could move it to another?
So the generator that's sitting, Main is just across the street here for anybody that doesn't know where the main pump station is. That is our largest pump station that flows the most sewage to our plant. The generator that we have sitting out there right now is a mobile generator that we use at both Midway and Siusla. So if we were to lose power tonight, that one generator, we'd have to run between those 3 pump stations to keep sewage flowing so that it doesn't overflow. What they're trying to do out there tomorrow, if they can get the parts, is go ahead and hardwire that in so that that pump station is not without a generator. But what that does is it leaves me with no generator for Midway and Siuslaw. So we're going to call a rental company to see if we can rent a generator and put that at Maine. And we still have our mobile one for Midway and Siuslaw if we lost funds. The difference that Bruce talked about in the quote that he's giving you is, as you know, because of this FEMA application being in process so long, we got that quote sometime back. And you know the material spikes that we're dealing with. I told Bruce I want to give myself some elbow room when we call Kat Peterson tomorrow and say, if we pull the trigger on this generator, how soon can you get it here? And is this quote you gave us still good? And so that's what we're dealing with. I definitely have enough in the contingency to do it. I definitely feel this is an emergency. This is not a good situation for us to be in.
And tell me if somebody's going to be sleeping next to the generator tonight?
I'm sorry?
Is somebody going to be sleeping next to the generator to tend?
Yeah, Marty and Mike are going to be rotating, babysitting that pump station tonight, monitoring that. There's no way for us to do it remotely.
That's the importance that we give this situation.
Yeah, good.
Okay, all right, thank you. The other one is that the architect/engineer submittals for Cannon Beach Elementary are to be submitted tomorrow at 4:00.
Interesting, good. Anybody else?
Any idea how many will be submitting?
We had 8 firms when we had the mandatory pre-bid, but a lot of times they don't follow through. So I'm guessing 3.
Good enough for me.
Yeah. I mean, and if we have more, that's even better. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Good of the order? Then we are adjourned. Thank you.
I think every meeting should be at least 3.5